Story 1.
My wife cheated with her boss for years. Me brother's clever plan delivered the ultimate payback. During our final university year, while hanging out with friends, I encountered Sarah celebrating her 21st birthday at a local Nashville club. Literally colliding with her table as I walked by, I inadvertently spilled her drink into her lap. After a few awkward moments, I apologized, and as we conversed while cleaning up, I couldn't help but ponder the concept of love at first sight. Nevertheless, I believed a unique chemistry pulled us together like a magnet. From that night onward, we commenced dating and never spent time apart. A year later, we exchanged vows, marking the beginning of our shared life. I'm Jonathan, but my friends call me Johnny. Armed with an accounting degree, I became a certified public accountant at a prominent Atlanta firm, where Sarah and I settled near our family. After gaining experience in the corporate realm, I ventured out to establish my own firm. Sarah, holding a business administration degree, supported me during the initial 2 years until the joyous news of our daughter Angel's impending arrival. Our relationship mirrored a fairy tale with an enduring love that persisted as we welcomed Angel into our lives. Over the subsequent decade, we embraced the routine of a typical family life. Me focus on business growth, while Sarah managed household affairs and raised our daughter. Our bed life was a source of contentment, with a frequency of at least 3 times a week. Describing our connection as pure love, our feelings were deep and sensual, avoiding experimentation or intense encounters out of mutual respect. We found joy in our shared experiences. Sarah found pleasure in lingual stimulation, a preference I gladly fulfilled, though she reserved lingual pleasure for special occasions, happening less than times during our marriage. Content with our life, I refrained from pressuring her, cherishing the harmony in our relationship. Sarah's constant attentiveness, evident from the day we exchanged vows, manifested in kisses, hugs, and shared moments whenever we were together. The incredible closeness in our marriage filled every second with love. Despite friends' initial skepticism claiming our affection wouldn't endure, they eventually recognized the uniqueness of our bond. After a decade, when Angel turned, Sarah expressed her desire to return to work. With Angel's established routine and daily return from school at p.m., Sarah conveyed her reluctance to stay at home daily, expressing a yearning to rejoin the workforce. After extensive discussions, we reached an agreement and formulated a plan to ensure Angel received the attention a 10-year-old girl needed. Sarah secured a position as a personal assistant to William, a lawyer years her senior. The job's favorable hours allowed Sarah to be home by every day, maintaining her presence for Angel. Our family grew stronger over time, residing in a comfortable apartment within an upscale complex with country club membership. Our financial stability allowed us to save for Angel's college and our retirement. We lived a blessed life, free from health, financial, and happiness concerns. As expected, our bed life underwent changes after a decade of marriage, slowing down from 3 to 4 times a week to only twice, typically on Friday and Saturday nights. While we became somewhat predictable, our love endured, and we continued to revel in our closeness. Sarah's unwavering attentiveness and displays of love persisted throughout the years, making our shared closeness more fulfilling than our physical expressions of love. Receiving spontaneous kisses and hugs, along with acknowledgement for her love, overwhelmed me. It constituted the most significant aspect of our marriage. I reciprocated the affection, but Sarah consistently ensured I understood the depth of her love. Angel joined the math club, staying after hours and returning home around 5 p.m. Simultaneously, Sarah began working late 2 nights a week, coinciding with Angel's schedule. We avoided leaving her alone at that age, ensuring our schedules matched. William, Sarah's boss, earned a promotion to senior partner in his father-in-law's firm. Consequently, Sarah worked a few extra hours on Tuesday and Thursday nights, returning home by 7 p.m. On these nights, I ensured dinner was ready for her after her long workday. Other than those 2 nights, everything in our marriage remained unchanged. My business was thriving, generating a good income as the company expanded to employees. We became a well-known and respected accounting firm, becoming a target for acquisition or merger with larger firms in the area. Angel began contemplating college and her future. Sarah still worked for William and remained as attractive as when we first met. The years treated Sarah well, maintaining her slim figure, complemented by long, appealing legs and a shapely bum. Despite her attractiveness, she maintained a professional and conservative demeanor. Our lifestyle, deemed by some as boring, involved spending most of our time together at home, attending movies or family events with our daughter. We were always together as a family, never going out alone or without each other as a couple. I received a call from William, her boss, informing me that Sarah would be honored with an award at a banquet the next month, and both Angel and I were invited. I proudly accepted the invitation, revealing to Angel that her mother would receive an award for professional excellence. Since it was a surprise, they wanted us there, and usually these meetings were for staff only. We were asked to keep it a secret until the award ceremony. In the last 5 years since Sarah started working for William, she consistently delivered excellent work, contributing to her increased happiness at home and boosted self-esteem. I knew she worked hard and was well liked in her company, and now, hearing about their desire to show appreciation made Angel and me proud. Sarah informed us about an upcoming business meeting at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, where she had to work late and give a presentation to the entire company. She looked forward to it, having spent many hours preparing in the weeks leading up to the event. At the time, she was unaware of our invitation or her award, and Angel and I kept it a secret. We could hardly wait for the event and Sarah's award. I took Angel shopping for a new dress, and I bought a new suit to ensure she would be proud of her family at the award ceremony. Sarah wore a knee-length dress with a back cutout, balancing professionalism with showcasing her beautiful curves. At 37, she remained attractive and desirable. Before the limo picked her up to make arrangements for the meeting, Angel and I hugged her, wishing her luck for her evening presentation. With 2 hours to get ready after she left, we both dressed on time and left to be at the event about 30 minutes before Sarah's presentation. One of the hosts greeted us, seating us at a central table with a clear view of the stage. Angel and I received special treatment, with everyone expressing their love for Sarah and delight in meeting us. We felt so welcome and happy to be there for our wife and mother. The lights in the audience dimmed as the introductions began on stage. Spotlights flickered as the first speaker introduced the firm's founder, the CEO, and then William, the senior partner. William provided a concise overview of the company's successful year and then introduced Sarah, who was tasked with sharing some of the past year's achievements. Sarah graced the stage, radiating beauty as always, and I observed Angel's pride in seeing her mother commence the presentation with a professional and practiced voice. Sarah delved into the company's excellent year, its accomplishments, and future projects, speaking for approximately minutes before returning the stage to William. Before her departure, William embraced her, delivering a few words to the audience. He highlighted the close collaboration with Sarah over the past 5 years, emphasizing her integral role in the organization. He expressed conviction that some of the successes outlined wouldn't have been possible without her. William then honored Sarah with the Chairman's Club Award, the company's highest honor, reserved for employees going above and beyond the call of duty and recognized for their commitment. Sarah received a sizable plaque and an envelope containing an award. With tears in her eyes, she accepted the check, embraced William, expressed gratitude to the audience, and turned to Angel and me. Our eyes welled with tears as we shared the pride in her mother's achievements, and those at our table offered hugs, creating one of our most joyful evenings, overflowing with pride and unable to suppress our smiles. We headed for a drink as the lights came on. Taking my daughter's glass, I assured her I'd be right back. At the bar, amidst long lines, I spotted an empty one near the stage and decided to fetch a double Jack and a soft drink for Angel. In high spirits, I threw $1.05 into the tip jar, collected my drinks, and turned to return to my table. It was precisely at that moment when my world fell apart. On the way back, something caught my eye, leading me to witness a couple behind the curtains engaged in an alarming embrace. Initially deeming it out of place for such an event, I recognized the dress the same one Sarah had worn that night. I turned once more, frozen in place, observing the couple sharing a heartfelt kiss. The embrace conveyed a familiarity beyond the moment, suggesting this wasn't their first encounter. It felt as if I were having an out-of-body experience, standing frozen with 2 drinks in hand and my mouth agape. I watched until the couple separated, confirming that it was indeed the love of my life sharing a romantic kiss with her boss, William. In that moment, I dropped one of the drinks, drawing the lover's attention. Sarah saw me and appeared shocked. As I returned to my senses, I turned and walked back to the table with the remaining drink. Sarah caught up, explaining the situation, and in a daze, I nodded and sat quietly with a sorrowful expression for the remainder of the evening. It was evident that I was distressed and no longer able to share in the joy around us. I witnessed more than a friendly kiss. In fact, Sarah and I hadn't kissed so passionately in years over 5, to be exact. Reflecting on those years and the changes that had occurred, I sensed trouble looming, though I wasn't certain of its nature at that point. Driving home, Angel and Sarah discussed the night, with Angel expressing pride in her mother. Still reeling from what I'd seen, I remained silent, lost in my own thoughts. Both girls noticed my reticence, attempting to coax me into conversation, but I maintained a persistent silence. Sarah, sensing the unease, tried to make amends with sweetness and extra affection. But I wasn't receptive. That night I made an effort to conceal my emotions from Angel, however. Being perceptive, she sensed my distress and sensibly allowed me to be with my thoughts. Before bedtime, she expressed her support, mentioning that she was available for a conversation. After a hug and a kiss, she went to bed. I silently withdrew, and shortly thereafter, Sarah joined me in the room. She inquired about my well-being, expressing concern despite her attempt to comfort me. After a minute of silence, I chose to turn away. Apologizing for the situation, she pleaded for communication, but I lay silent, anger replacing my initial shock. I refrained from speaking, realizing any words would be hurtful and unproductive. That night, her attempts at affection went unanswered, and I endured the worst sleep. The next morning, a Saturday, I opened my eyes to sunlight, anticipating a challenging day. Recalling the distressing scene, I tried to make sense of the situation. Climbing out of bed, I went to the bathroom, washed, and brushed my teeth. Returning to the bedroom, Sarah sat up in bed, watching me and trying to act normal. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" she asked, as if nothing had happened. I ignored her question, donned a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, and before leaving the bedroom, I looked at her. Speaking to her for the first time since the kiss, I turned to her with a hateful look and uttered, "How long?" She didn't answer, merely looking at her hands. I left her, heading out for breakfast and some time to think, ending the conversation. Feeling a little distraught, I anticipated changes and dreaded hearing what she was going to tell me about her affair. She knows she has to tell me the truth because she knows if she lies, I'll know. Sarah and I have been very close, and she has never given me any reason to believe that she wants another man. I haven't noticed any change in her closeness, and she still hugs and kisses me all the time. How can she act like that when she's having an affair? I mean, if she's with him, how can she show me all this love? Can the woman I love really have an affair with William? I glanced at the clock, aware that Angel was supposed to be at school for math club by 1 p.m. Realizing it was time to face it, I drove home and found Sarah on the patio with a cup of coffee, staring out at the lake. Without saying a word, I poured myself a cup, sat down next to her, and asked her those two words again, "How long?" After a few minutes of silence, I noticed tears running down Sarah's face. The revelation that followed sent a shiver down my spine and caused a stomachache so intense that I almost felt nauseous. In a soft, tearful voice, she mentioned a span of 3 years. I inquired, seeking confirmation, and she affirmed, mentioning the nights I worked late. "Yes," she whispered. I sat in silence for a few minutes before finally breaking it. My attempt at understanding led to the conclusion that the 2 nights she worked late every week for the last 3 years were the only times she had been lovemaking with William. Seeking clarification, I asked if my understanding was correct. She affirmed, stating they had never engaged in such activities anywhere else, and expressing a desire to explain more when given the chance. I expressed my response, urging her to withhold any explanations. She had just disclosed her involvement with her boss 2 nights a week for the past 3 years. The arithmetic was simple, over instances, assuming a minimum of twice a night. I confronted Sarah, emphasizing the gravity of her actions over times of betrayal behind my back. I questioned the possibility of any man enduring such knowledge. Tears streamed down her face onto her lap as I continued. The depth of my hurt unfolded as I reflected on the potential mockery they shared, picturing them laughing at my ignorance. Expressing my gratitude with bitter sarcasm, I acknowledged the profound humiliation and intentional pain she inflicted. The person I believed loved me had betrayed our marriage and shattered my heart, an unexpected and devastating revelation that left me profoundly wounded. She insisted, saying it wasn't as it seemed. I didn't buy it. Disrupting her attempt to explain, I instructed her to be silent. Ignoring her pleas, I stood up and left the porch as she remained seated, crying and begging for me to stay. I maintained a composed exterior, however, internally, I felt an explosion of emotions. To gain control over my turbulent feelings, I went for a ride. The sense of betrayal was unfamiliar and overwhelming, and I needed time to process her words and decide on my course of action. I needed to talk to someone, and the only family I had left was my brother Tony. We were very close growing up, but we took different paths in life. Tony spent 5 years in a federal prison for medication trafficking and moved in dangerous circles. By comparison, I was a churchgoer, an accountant who paid too much in taxes and didn't even have a parking ticket. Tony and I didn't talk very often, but growing up, Tony always looked to me for support. I was there for him during his trial, and thanks to my political contacts, was able to get his sentence reduced from the mandatory 20 years to 5 years. That morning, I called him. I inquired about Tony's well-being and caught up with him. Subsequently, I disclosed the challenging situation I was confronting. "Of course. What's up?" I conveyed the difficulty of the situation, disclosing that Sarah had cheated on me and that I had just discovered it. Experiencing hurt and pain, I detailed how I was aimlessly driving around and emphasized the necessity of talking to someone. I apologized for burdening him with my problems. Oh man, I love Sarah, And I can't believe she did this. Do you know who did it yet and what exactly? Acknowledging his disbelief and love for Sarah, I admitted that I knew who was involved but lacked all the details. I disclosed that it wasn't a one-time occurrence and expressed a strong desire for revenge against the person responsible. The intense anger I felt even made me contemplate damaging my wife. Tony offered his advice, drawing on the experiences of many friends who had gone through similar situations. He urged me to release my anger by engaging in physical activities like going to the gym or jogging. He emphasized the importance of calming down and allowing him to assist me in navigating through the challenges. Tony encouraged me to confront the situation by gathering all available information and deciding on a course of action. He assured me of his support in executing any plans I formulated, advising me to keep my words minimal and act as normally as possible. He acknowledged the difficulty of the task. Finally, he instructed me to call him the next day with updates, assuring me of his continued assistance. Expressing gratitude, I thanked Tony for his help and conveyed my intention to call him the following day, bringing our conversation to an end. On the drive, I passed a mattress store and had my first idea. I parked in the lot and made the first move. I had no intention of leaving the marriage until Angel was in college, which meant I'd be married for the next 2 years. There was no way I was going to sleep with Sarah again, and I'd be damned if I left my bedroom. So I had my first action plan, which made me realize there was a lot more to do. After meeting with the salesperson, I told them I'd pay full price if they could deliver the 2 full-size beds I had just picked out, along with all the furniture, including the headboard and all the hardware and assembly. I paid an extra $100 to have the current king-size bed dismantled. We arranged delivery for 4 p.m. that afternoon. I texted Angel to let her know I'd pick her up, drove to her school, and waited in the parking lot. We went to lunch, and I gently explained to her that there would be some changes in the house in the near future. During our conversation, Angel inquired about the events at dinner the previous night, expressing her awareness that something had occurred. She requested not to be kept in the dark, emphasizing the importance of maintaining the honesty we had always shared. In response, I acknowledged the fairness of her request, recognizing the difficulty of the situation and her right to know. I revealed that I had observed her mother and her boss kissing backstage, offering the perspective that it might have been a congratulatory gesture. I downplayed the significance of the kiss, suggesting it shouldn't be a cause for intense anger. Following my confrontation with her mother, she admitted to having an affair with him for 3 years, a revelation that I found difficult to comprehend. I conveyed that this revelation had forever changed our relationship. Angel then questioned whether I intended to divorce her mother. I explained to Angel that I hadn't decided on divorce yet, and that I was still working through the situation. I reassured her we would remain married, but things would be different. I emphasized the importance of her being strong and not taking sides, reminding her that her mother loved her. I acknowledged the mistakes her mother and I had made, but expressed the desire for Angel's life not to be adversely affected by them. I asked her not to judge us and to understand that we loved her more than anything. Throughout this conversation, she was in tears. She was aware that revealing the truth had caused me pain, and though I didn't want her to feel guilty, she insisted it was necessary for Angel to understand why our lives were changing. When we returned home together, Sarah was surprised. Judging by Angel's expression, it was clear that I had shared the information. Angel, in response, gave her mother a disdainful look and retreated to her room without uttering a word. I explained to Sarah that Angel had a right to know, and it was crucial for her to comprehend the reasons behind the impending changes in our household. I suggested that Sarah explain things to Angel once she overcame the initial shock. Concerned about the future, Sarah inquired if I planned to divorce her. I assured her that it wasn't an immediate consideration, as I wanted to observe how things unfolded, especially considering Angel's well-being. However, I affirmed that significant changes were inevitable beginning from that day. Sarah pleaded with me to allow her to explain and implored me to understand, emphasizing that she loved me and that we were husband and wife. I confronted Sarah, pointing out that she had willingly engaged in an affair with William over 500 times without my knowledge. I expressed my disbelief that she believed there was anything she could say to gain acceptance from a self-respecting man. I questioned her perception of my strength and suggested that she hadn't thoroughly considered the consequences of her actions. I revealed that what truly hurt me was the loss of the closeness that I had once cherished and looked forward to. I declared that I could no longer share that closeness with her, and I conveyed the impact it would have on me emotionally. I stated that I would no longer go to bed with her or make love, and I expressed the sorrow I felt in losing the small gestures of affection like kisses and hugs. Acknowledging the inevitability of changes in our relationship due to her breach of marriage vows, I declared that, like her, I would no longer be faithful and would seek other lovers. This was a departure from my previous stance, as I had never considered such actions before. I concluded by asserting that she could continue seeing her lover because she would no longer receive anything from me. It was as if she had received a blow on the head and physically withdrew from my remarks. She lost her balance and dropped onto the couch, startled. Sarah had obviously not realized the consequences of her infidelity. I communicated to Sarah that I couldn't agree to remain faithful after her betrayal, considering the magnitude of her actions. I expressed my intention to seek other relationships, a decision influenced by the pain caused by her cheating, lying, and infidelity. As the conversation unfolded, the doorbell rang, providing a timely interruption. I welcomed the installers who had arrived to remove our shared bed. I explained to Sarah that as a result of our strained relationship, I had purchased 2 new beds to replace the old one. The installation process was already in progress. Sarah questioned the presence of the installers and the reason behind the changes. I clarified that, since I had decided never to share a bed with her again, it wouldn't be fair for either of us to move into the guest room. Therefore, I had bought 2 separate beds. Our current bed was being removed, and new ones were being set up. I informed her about the option to exchange her mattress within 90 days if she didn't like the one I had chosen. In response to these revelations, Sarah inquired with surprise, "We're going to sleep in separate beds?" I explained to Sarah that it wouldn't be fair for either of us to give up our shared bedroom, especially since our closeness had come to an end. I expressed disbelief at the situation and the necessity for the changes that were taking place. In response, I reminded Sarah of her affair with her boss, emphasizing that it had occurred over 500 times behind my back. I watched as the men removed the bed we had shared for years, feeling a mix of pain and regret. The regret stemmed from being married to someone who had betrayed me so profoundly. The following day, I called my brother Tony, revealing the shocking truth about Sarah's affair with her boss. I expressed my astonishment at the revelation that she had been involved with him twice a week for the past 3 years, amounting to over 500 instances. I admitted to feeling blindsided and humiliated, uncertain about how to proceed. I sought information about the identity of the man involved in the affair. I disclosed to my brother Tony the identity of Sarah's boss, William Aston, and expressed my deep dissatisfaction with the situation. Tony sympathized, acknowledging the unfortunate circumstances. I then shared my desire for William to experience significant suffering for his role in the affair. Tony asked about my plans regarding Sarah, and I expressed my intention to divorce her once our daughter Angel was in college. I revealed my plan to make her life difficult until then, shutting her out and ensuring a lonely existence. I emphasized my determination to expose her actions and ruin her career if she attempted to initiate a divorce before Angel started college. Concerned for my well-being, Tony offered to take care of William Aston while I managed affairs at home. I cautioned him against engaging in any activities that could lead to legal trouble and insisted on handling my situation responsibly. Tony assured me that he understood and promised not to take actions that could jeopardize his own safety. We concluded the conversation with the understanding that we would talk again soon. The following weeks were stressful at home. Sarah tried to engage me in conversation, but I refused to answer her with more than a word or two. I could tell she was frustrated and tried to help me forgive her, but I was still hurt, angry, and unyielding. I buried myself in work, came home late every night, and wasn't home on the weekends. Tensions were high and everyone was walking on eggshells, waiting for me to explode. One night, after a long day at work, I came home and found Sarah in her bed, waiting to talk to me. After all these years of sleeping with the only woman I loved, I was now sleeping in a bed just a few feet away from Sarah's. It was sad, and I wasn't sure how I was going to do this for the next 2 years until Angel left for university. After my shower, as I lay down in bed, Sarah initiated a conversation, asking about my day. I responded briefly with a simple, "Good." She expressed a desire to discuss some matters and acknowledged that she knew I wanted nothing to do with her. Despite that, she conveyed her love for me and expressed a willingness to make small improvements in our relationship. She proposed the idea of quitting her job, suggesting that we didn't need the extra money and that she could be more present for me. She asked for my thoughts on the matter. Despite my efforts to control my anger, her attempt to use terms of closeness triggered a rage in me. I sat up and spoke harshly, expressing indifference to her decisions and urging her to do whatever she wanted with her life. I made it clear that I no longer wanted any romantic involvement with her. Tears welled in my eyes as I conveyed the emotional impact of her actions. As I rolled over and rested my head on the pillow, I heard Sarah sobbing, realizing the depth of the pain I felt. She pleaded for an opportunity to talk, acknowledging the sorrow and regret she felt for her actions. She expressed her continued love for me, the anguish caused by our lack of physical connection, and the heartbreak from the perceived coldness between us. She confessed her uncertainty about how to fix the situation, but emphasized her desire to salvage the relationship. Sarah also mentioned the toxic tensions in the house and expressed concern for our daughter, Angel, who seemed affected by the strained atmosphere. She suggested the idea of counseling to find a way to coexist without hatred, urging me to consider it for Angel's sake, as her departure from the home was imminent. I sighed, acknowledging the fairness in Sarah's concern for Angel, realizing that our daughter was going through a difficult time. After a brief pause, surprising Sarah, I agreed to attend therapy, emphasizing that my motivation was solely for Angel's benefit, not Sarah's. Sarah, visibly moved, interpreted this as progress, and her tears shifted from sorrow to happiness. The following evening, Sarah informed me that she had found a therapist and planned to meet with her individually the next day. She mentioned arranging a couples meeting for Friday at 3 p.m., recognizing the necessity to find a way to coexist without a prolonged divorce process. I agreed with Sarah's decision and acknowledged that living in peace was essential. Angel expressed excitement upon learning about the counseling sessions, hopeful that they might bring her family back together. Her smile, absent for weeks, reappeared. Sarah shared the news with me, stating that Angel was pleased about my agreement to attend couples counseling. Every night after work I dined alone, intentionally avoiding spending time with Sarah. However, the absence of my daughter, my Angel, during these moments left a void. I longed for the warmth of her smile, the comfort of her hugs, and the endearing way she called me Daddy. Despite my desire to distance myself from Sarah, the yearning for a connection with my daughter tugged at my heart. Sarah went to her solo counseling session and was wiped out that evening. When I got home, I found that she had been crying, and I realized that it was probably hard to tell someone that they had cheated on our family for years. Somehow, I had no sympathy or compassion for the woman who had broken my heart. My brother Tony called me later that week to tell me what was going on. He explained that he was still owed some favors from his former acquaintances, and that the debt they owed him was not in cash, but in favors for what he had done for them. He told me not to bother, that everything was in control. After contacting one of his associates, Tony explained the situation. They understood and told him they would take care of it and let him know when it was done. Tony explained that they did want to hurt him, and they wanted to leave it so he would remember it for the rest of his life. He left it in their hands, and he knew it was not going to be pretty. Tony gave them the man's name, the place where he worked, and his phone number. That was all they needed. I guess when Sarah told William that I had found out about their affair, he was heartbroken. He loved Sarah and the way she made him feel. Apparently, they considered themselves a couple when they were together and shared their love during that brief time alone. After their affair became a habit, neither of them believed that their few hours a week could hurt anyone. They were simply two friends spending some time together. Both believed that their spouses never gave up anything or missed their love and time. It was only a few hours a week, and neither spouse missed their short time together. It was the perfect relationship that gave them the excitement and extra love that had been blunted by many years of marriage. After the initial meeting with Dr. Winters, the counselor, our session commenced as expected. The counselor took the lead in initiating the conversation. She addressed me, expressing gratitude for my attendance, and acknowledged that Sarah had already shared her perspective during their meeting earlier in the week. Dr. Winters emphasized the importance of honesty in my responses, and assured me that everything discussed during the sessions would remain confidential. She encouraged openness, reassuring me that nothing I said would be shocking to her. I nodded in acknowledgement, curious to see how the session would unfold. The counselor, Dr. Winters, prompted Sarah to share her intentions for the counseling sessions. Sarah, my unfaithful wife, turned her attention toward me, her eyes filled with tears, and expressed her desires. She conveyed a strong longing to communicate with me, rebuild our family, and restore the physical and emotional connection we once had. Her emotions were palpable, and I sensed the sincerity in her words. Although it was difficult to witness her pain over the loss of my love, I maintained composure, sitting quietly as she wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. When asked by the doctor about my goals for the sessions, I expressed a desire to eliminate the haunting significance of the number 500 from my thoughts. I noticed Sarah's reaction, a wince and averted gaze as I mentioned the number. In response to Dr. Winters' confusion about the number's significance, I adopted a sarcastic tone. Referencing Sarah's prior session with the counselor, I questioned Sarah about omitting this detail, prompting the counselor to request a more coherent explanation. I clarified that, being an accountant, numbers held particular importance to me. I revealed that over the past 3 years, Sarah had engaged in intimate activities with William over 500 times without my knowledge. This revelation had left an indelible mark on my consciousness, making it the first thing that came to mind whenever the number 500 appeared. After each outburst, a period of silence ensued as emotions settled. The counselor, addressing me as Mr. Park, expressed understanding of my pain but cautioned against using hurtful language. I offered an apology, acknowledging the necessity of expressing my pain and perspective. Sarah, in tears, repeated her apologies, and my anger subsided as I finally relaxed. In response to the counselor's question, I expressed a desire to find a path toward forgiveness for Sarah. My ultimate goal was to create a home devoid of hate and anger, especially for the sake of our daughter. I emphasized the need to live together in peace, recognizing the impact on our family. I thanked the counselor for the opportunity to share my sentiments. Over the next few weeks, I managed to speak in a friendly tone without the venom. Things at home were much better, not good, but better. Angel was home more often. We went out to eat, went to the movies, went out with friends, and tried to be a normal couple. The only problem was that everyone noticed there was no closeness between us at all. I never held her hand, we never kissed, and I never let her hug or touch me. Several friends asked Sarah what was wrong because our affection was the exact opposite of what everyone had seen in the last 15 years. It was obvious that we were having a hard time, but we kept going. 2 weeks into our initial couple session, there was an intrusion at William's residence. Unidentified men entered, swiftly administered a beating without disclosing their motive, and promptly left. William was later taken to the hospital. Upon learning about William's incident, Sarah was thunderstruck, aware that I desired revenge and was somehow involved. That night, recounting how someone broke into her boss's house and attacked him, Sarah watched for a reaction. A small grin flitted across my face as I responded, "Wow, that's something," and resumed reading the book in front of me. Struck by my indifferent response, Sarah's inquiry about my feelings for William struck a nerve. Looking up, I glared at her and retorted, "Oh, I am so sorry your lover got hurt. Do you want me to send him flowers? Or should we go see him, darling?" She looked away and the conversation ended. Sarah sensed my responsibility for the incident and knew that expressing remorse for William could undo all the progress we had made. Earlier in the week, I received a text from Tony with a thumbs-up emoji, marking our last contact for several months. As things cooled down, I wondered if the police would uncover their affair and question me about the attack, but that never transpired. The police put the report on an open case file and shifted their focus to other crimes. Several months passed, and as promised, I began dating and going out late. After Sarah quizzed me about my activities a few times, she realized she should mind her own business and avoid causing problems. I clarified that we were husband and wife in name only, cohabiting for the sake of our daughter. We eventually found a way to remain civil, and family life was improving. Sarah finally comprehended the extent of the hurt she had caused her husband, acknowledging the irreparable nature of the damage. To keep the family intact, I warned her that I would inform her family and friends about her affair and make her life unbearable if she pursued a divorce before Angel left for college. Sarah remained legally married but emotionally alone. She lacked someone to reciprocate the love she once gave through hugs, kisses, and affection. Defining her relationships with 2 men, this love was now lost. Despite attending counseling alone, her husband's enjoyment with another woman intensified her sadness. Sarah, driven by vanity, selfishness, and stupidity, had destroyed her marriage and the man she loved. Angel, despite still loving her mother, reminded her that she had brought this upon herself every time she complained about her father. Angel would never forgive her mother for hurting her father, but her love for her mother endured. After Angel left for college, I returned home with divorce papers. A year earlier, I had contemplated ruining Sarah's finances, but I opted for an equitable split. Over the last 2 years, I forgave her, but the love I once felt was irretrievably lost. Sarah, unsurprised by the divorce papers, signed them without protest, relieved at the prospect of starting anew. Having learned her lesson, she vowed never to cheat again. The painful divorce from the woman I loved left me full of remorse for the events leading to our separation. I yearned to undo it all or find a way to forgive her, but the memory of the 500 betrayals haunted me. We sold the house and divided the equity. I moved in with Trisha, a dancer years my junior, whom I had been dating. My confidence and happiness restored, I finally found peace. Sarah never abandoned hope for reconciliation and wept for weeks upon learning of my marriage to another woman. Unable to forgive herself for the damage caused by her selfishness and hubris, she dated but never recovered the lost love. Weight gain, faded looks, and bitterness characterized her lonely life. Angel and Sarah maintained closeness, but my communication with Sarah dwindled. She would never relive the love shared with her wonderful husband and bore the pain she inflicted on her loved ones. Ensuring Angel's college was funded, she became a psychologist, driven to help others. She now enjoys a happy married life. The lessons learned from this experience are profound, illustrating the lasting impact of a beautiful yet damaging past.
Story 2.
I realized it was time to wrap things up and leave the master control booth before someone showed up to shut me down. If I acted quickly, I could switch off the live assist mode and return the system to its fully automated broadcast mode. Our local TV audience had seen enough for the night. Once I had the system running normally again, I could leave and grab a drink. I really needed one. I also understood that there would be consequences to face. consequences at home and from the general manager and FCC once they pieced it all together and came after me. But I was already feeling like I was in a bad situation, so I didn't care anymore. Like I said, I needed a drink. I headed to Frankie's on Roswell Road, a popular local sports bar, and ordered a beer. I sat there watching the end of the Monday night football game while having a few more beers. There was a lot of chatter in the bar, and I knew what it was about. I couldn't catch everything, but I heard enough to know I had accomplished my goal. I had stirred up conversation. Luckily, nobody pulled me into their discussions, so I drank alone in silence while witnessing the Saints dominating the Falcons. By the time 10:30 p.m. rolled around, I was feeling numb. The game had ended, and my team had lost. New Orleans 23, Atlanta 3. It seemed like the Saints were particularly motivated, perhaps because it was their first game back in their stadium since the hurricane, and they completely outplayed the Falcons. Our station aired the game alongside ESPN because we were one of the teams involved. I inquired with the bartender about leaving my car in the parking lot overnight, and he agreed it was a wise decision given my condition. Recognizing my state, he arranged for a cab since I resided just a short distance away in a pleasant residential area of Sandy Springs. So, that's pretty much the conclusion of the story, and I suppose I should begin at the start to give you a clear picture of how I ended up in this situation. My name is Richard Head, but my friends call me Dick. I work as a broadcast engineer for WBDK, a local CBS affiliate in Atlanta, Georgia. I hold a graduate degree from MIT in electrical engineering and computer science, and I also obtained a second degree in broadcast technologies. Needless to say, I'm highly qualified in my field and have held several challenging positions. I've been working in the industry for 22 years, with stints at various television stations along the East Coast, before settling in Atlanta for the past 5 years. If you're curious about my appearance, I'm 46 years old with dark hair that's graying at the temples. I've never felt the need to conceal the gray, but I do apply a bit of dye to my small mustache to keep it from showing any signs of gray. I stand at 6 3 and weigh around 190 pounds, although I haven't stepped on a scale in quite some time. I'd say I'm moderately attractive, though I wouldn't compare myself to Mel Gibson or Richard Gere. You'll notice I didn't mention any younger actors, primarily because I'm not familiar with many of their names, and also because I'm not in the same age bracket, so it wouldn't be relevant. Anyway, I consider myself good-looking, but I'm not the type you'd see in a romance novel. My wife Sharon and I have been married for 22 years, and we have 2 daughters, Melanie and Stephanie. Melanie is married, while Stephanie is a senior in college. Sharon stands around 5 inches tall, weighing no more than 135 lbs, with long blonde hair that reaches her shoulders. She's incredibly attractive, with a figure that catches attention, and she's one of the sweetest women I've ever known. It's hard to find someone who doesn't like her. For the past 18 months, Sharon has been working as a secretary for our pastor, Reverend Bob Shelter. Now, on to the story. Last Friday, I had some extra time for lunch and decided to surprise Sharon by taking her out to lunch. I parked near the side entrance of the church offices due to the rain. When I arrived, she wasn't in her office, but I decided to walk in anyway. As I stood there, I overheard Sharon speaking to Pastor Bob in his office. She mentioned how excited she was for Monday night, expressing anticipation about spending time together due to my work covering the Monday night football games. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Their conversation turned intimate, with talk of booking a room at the La Quinta Inn and expressing longing for physical intimacy. Hearing this filled me with shock, nausea, and rising anger. I knew I had to leave before I did something rash. It was a struggle to walk away, but I couldn't bring myself to confront them in that moment. Despite my desire to confront them, I feared I might act impulsively and regret it later. I slipped out the same way I came in, hoping they hadn't noticed my presence. They had security cameras, but I entered through a side door they likely didn't monitor. As I drove away, it was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever made. I was so shaken that I knew I wouldn't be productive for the rest of the day, so I called the station to let them know I wasn't feeling well and would be heading home. I needed time to gather my thoughts, and home seemed like the best place for that. Sharon wouldn't be home until after 4 p.m., so I had plenty of time to contemplate. It was evident that Sharon was having an affair with Pastor Bob. I decided he would no longer be my pastor. In my mind, he became Bastard Bob, a fitting alteration. I needed to understand the extent of their relationship, how long it had been going on, and why it had started. While some people might prefer not to know these details, I was not one of them. I desperately wanted to understand why this had happened in my seemingly wonderful marriage. Clearly, Sharon didn't view our marriage as I did, and she wasn't the person I thought she was. I resolved to uncover everything I needed to know and address the situation head-on. I wasn't weak, and I would handle both of them accordingly. Once home, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat on the patio to gather my thoughts. The pleasant weather and fresh air helped me clear my mind as I contemplated the situation. I knew I would eventually figure it all out. I just needed to calm myself. I won't deny shedding a few tears that afternoon. While I understood that I didn't own Sharon or her body, it was devastating to think she would be intimate with another man, or men, after vowing herself to me on our wedding day. While some might not take those vows seriously, I certainly did, and I believed she did too. Experiencing something like that prompts you to question your entire set of values and wonder if you've been naive your whole life to believe in fidelity and love, along with all that accompanies it. The most damaging aspect of having a cheating partner isn't just the act of infidelity itself. It's the loss of belief in them and everything they say or do. You lose trust in them, the very foundation of your marriage, leaving you feeling exposed and afraid. Despite being 6'3" inches tall and weighing 190 pounds, I felt vulnerable and scared. It highlights how severely a cheating spouse can affect someone, knocking them down like nothing else could. As I sat there grappling with my emotions, striving to remain composed and rational so I could process everything, I realized there were past doubts I had dismissed due to my trust in Sharon. These seemingly insignificant issues, now accumulated, formed a heavy weight in the pit of my stomach as I pieced it all together. How could I have been so blind? Trust, that's how. I had placed my trust in her. Today that trust was shattered, and all those minor clues had merged into a burden that would be hard to bear. I needed facts. That's what I craved. I wanted to understand why this happened, how long it had been going on, how frequent it was, where it took place, and who else was involved. My trust was obliterated, but I was determined to uncover the answers I needed. I realized my marriage was a facade, and I would confront that reality. But first, I needed clarity. Unwilling to face Sharon yet without revealing my suspicions, I left the house at 3 p.m. to avoid being there when she returned. I drove into town, stopped at the station to gather some essentials for the next few days, and briefly spoke with my boss about needing time off early in the week to deal with personal matters. He seemed understanding, so I headed to Frankie's to pass the time until I had to return home. At 5 p.m., I called Sharon to let her know I'd be stopping somewhere for a while and wouldn't be home for dinner. She expressed annoyance, mentioning she was feeling aroused and had plans for the evening, but if I stopped, those plans would be off the table. Yeah, like I'd want that aroused state caused by Bastard Bob. She might be in the mood, but it's because of him, not me. She can satisfy herself for all I care. I told her, "Sweetheart, I've already planned to stop by, so just stay excited for me, and I'll take care of you when I get back." I knew that would stir her up. She replied, "Don't count on it, pal. If you think you can treat me like that, you won't be getting any action for a while." To myself, I thought that's exactly what I wanted. I wasn't going to touch her again until I found out what was going on, and maybe never again. I arrived home around 10:30 p.m., pretty drunk, but not too drunk to notice the bedroom door locked. I smirked and banged on the door, figuring she was awake. I shouted, "Fine, if that's how you want it, don't expect me to tend to your needs. Just suffer." Then I headed for the spare bedroom, knowing she'd be furious. It would give me a break from explaining why I didn't want to be intimate with her. The next morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee when I walked in. I could feel the chill in the air as her stare pierced me. If I hadn't known about her infidelity, her look would have sent shivers down my spine. I grinned at her and said, "No need to get up and make breakfast, honey. I'll grab something on my way to golf." I left through the kitchen door, tossed my clubs in the trunk, and drove off. Shortly after, my phone rang. Seeing it was her, I ignored it. A few minutes later, I checked the message. She was furious. "You jerk! How could you do this to me? Get back here right now." "Bastard?" No, that was Bastard Bob, not me. If anyone deserved that title, it was him, not me. I had no intention of golfing. It just bought me some time. Instead, I drove straight to my former church. Did you think I'd ever want to hear Bastard Bob preach again? It was still early, so I knew no one would be around, and I was right. I entered the building. Yes, we had a key because my wife worked there, and headed straight to the offices. My objective was to install remote micro cameras and mini microphones in her office and in Bastard Bob's office. It didn't take long to accomplish, and I concealed the transmitter behind old hymnals in the supply closet across the hall. The receiver was wired into my car's electrical system, enabling me to monitor their conversations and activities whenever they were in their offices. While I didn't expect much activity at the church, I was confident that observing them and listening to their conversations for a few days would yield valuable information. After ensuring everything was functioning correctly, I searched through her desk but found nothing noteworthy. However, I noticed a significant asterisk on her calendar for Monday, aligning with what I had overheard on Friday. I prepared accordingly. Next, I investigated Bastard Bob's office, but had little success finding incriminating evidence until a last-minute revelation struck me. Inspired by my surroundings, after all, I was in a church, I searched through filing cabinets for receipts of church expenditures. Sure enough, I discovered a file containing receipts for the La Quinta Inn in Roswell. Some were from late 2005, and others from the spring of 2006. Aware that I was pushing my luck by lingering, I quickly made copies of the receipts and restored everything to its original state before leaving. I drove to the golf course, parked in my usual spot, and entered the clubhouse to ensure my presence was noted. I settled at a table, nursing a Sprite for a couple of hours, scrutinizing the bills. I realized that the two from late 2005 were both on Mondays, coinciding with dates when I attended a conference at CBS headquarters in New York. What infuriated me the most was Bastard Bob's audacity to charge those rooms to the church under the label of conference room rental for meetings. He was having an affair with my wife in a motel, and I had unknowingly footed the bill. Though we had contributed to the church financially, I vowed not to contribute any longer. Their situation was dire now. With just a bit more evidence, their fate would be sealed. I was certain this had been ongoing for nearly a year, if not longer, aligning with suspicions I had entertained earlier. My hunch was that Bastard Bob had been involved with her even before she started working for him. Initially, she held a good position at the Telfor Corporation as a receptionist. However, she eagerly embraced the opportunity to work for the church, citing its proximity to home and her desire to serve. She claimed the pay was comparable to her previous job, but it was evident she was more enticed by the extra perks. My anger was escalating by the minute. I couldn't fathom how naive I had been. It infuriated me, but it also sickened me to realize that the woman I had cherished throughout our marriage could betray me without a second thought. I was determined to make them pay. Feeling it was time to delve deeper into my investigation, I retrieved my iPod from the car and tuned it to pick up the frequency of the receiver I had placed in the trunk. As I scrolled through the data, I watched as Bastard Bob made his way into his office and dialed a number. I regretted not bugging his phone directly, realizing I would only hear one side of the conversation, but decided it was better than nothing. I listened in as Bob spoke. "Yes, Sharon, I'm at the church. I came right after you called. What's troubling you so much?" There was a pause, presumably for Sharon's reply, which I couldn't hear. Bob continued, querying, "Oh really, has he done that before?" Another pause followed, allowing Sharon to respond. Bob pressed on, "I see. What do you think triggered his reaction?" Yet another pause indicated Sharon's explanation. Bob seemed concerned. "You don't suppose he's suspicious of us, do you, Sharon?" After a pause, Bob chuckled. "All right, well, you can get back at him on Monday night." He then hung up the phone and sat in deep thought. Just before I turned off the receiver, I caught him muttering something under his breath. I made sure to record that muttering, thinking it might be useful later. With the transmission ended, I headed home, anticipating a frosty reception. Upon arrival, I busied myself with chores, mowing the lawn and cleaning the basement, in an attempt to ease the tension. My wife, Sharon, was silent when I entered, but the air was thick with unspoken words. At dinner, Sharon couldn't hold back any longer. Dick, what's going on with you lately? Why have you been acting this way? I retorted, Sharon, considering you locked me out of our bedroom last night, I think you should be pondering your actions. It's rare for me to go out with the guys, and the one time I do, you explode. This situation is on you. Her frustration boiled over. Damn you, she snapped. I met her anger calmly. Is that how a devout Christian woman should speak? Your actions hardly reflect your professed beliefs. Oh my goodness, her expression was unmistakable. Guilt was plastered all over her face so thickly that anyone seeing her would have known she was unfaithful. How she could have believed I wouldn't notice, I don't understand. I'll admit, though, she did manage to recover smoothly and eventually excused herself from the table. But I couldn't help thinking, when I reveal the truth, her recovery won't be so graceful. Later, she entered the family room where I was watching television. Confidentially, it was Fox News, attempting to find balanced news coverage. Her eyes seemed a bit swollen, suggesting she might have shed some tears. The remainder of the evening proceeded without any major incident, and when I was ready for bed, I simply walked down the hall to the spare bedroom and turned in. A few minutes later, she entered the room and stood there. What's the matter? I inquired. Aren't you going to join me in bed? She asked. Nope, you made it clear that intimacy wasn't on the agenda, so I might as well sleep alone and get a good night's rest, I replied. With that, she hurriedly left the room in tears. Frankly, I felt indifferent. Sunday morning, she woke me at 8 a.m., dressed for church, and asked if I intended to join her. I responded, No, I'm staying home today. You go ahead and be the model church lady, and I'll enjoy a relaxing day here. Once again, I noticed that familiar expression on her face. I sensed she was starting to grasp the situation, but she managed to compose herself once more. However, this time, as she turned and left the room, I thought I detected a hint of sadness in her eyes. A while later, I heard her car drive off. Later, she attempted to initiate a conversation, but I brushed her off, insisting she leave me alone. That concluded the day, and we both retreated to our separate spaces. Monday morning, I left the house without encountering or speaking to her. As I was leaving, my phone rang, and tearfully, she apologized, expressing her love and lamenting the situation. We'll discuss everything when I return home tonight, I replied before ending the call. I informed my boss that I would still be off for the day, but would handle the Monday night football game as planned. He was pleased with my availability and inquired about my well-being, to which I responded with a generic, as good as can be expected. My next destination was the La Quinta Inn in Roswell. At the lobby, I approached a young man named Kevin, who was stationed behind the check-in desk. I explained my situation candidly, stating that I suspected my wife of infidelity and that she would likely be at the motel that night with another man. Despite his initial skepticism, I offered him a deal. If he allowed me to place a microphone in the room to record their conversation, I would provide him with a couple of tickets to the next Falcons game. He negotiated for 4 tickets, which I agreed to, knowing I had access to them through the station. Eventually, he handed me the key to the only Whirlpool suite available. He was unaware that I planned not only to install a couple of mini microphones, but also to position a pair of micro cameras, much like the ones I had set up in the church offices. Additionally, I inserted a bug into the phone line to capture both sides of their conversations. After setting everything up, I conducted a test to ensure the transmission was clear, and the views from both the Whirlpool and the bed were satisfactory. Confident in the setup, I confirmed that the devices were discreetly hidden and exited the room. On my way out, I returned the key to Kevin at the front desk and handed him the tickets for next week's game as promised. Thanks, Kevin. I hope this all goes smoothly. Enjoy the game. With ample time to spare, I attended to several tasks I needed to address. I visited our bank and obtained cashier's checks for half of the funds from both our checking and savings accounts. I then proceeded to cancel our joint credit cards. Following that, I contacted my broker and arranged a meeting shortly after lunch to make adjustments to our investment accounts. He assured me everything would be prepared by the time I arrived. Next, I reached out to my attorney to discuss divorce proceedings and other related matters. We scheduled an appointment for later that afternoon when he would be available to meet with me. Finally, I drove to Planters National Bank in Marietta, Georgia, where I opened new accounts solely in my name and deposited the cashier's checks. I went for lunch in Marietta, although I had little appetite. Afterward, I drove to my broker's office to review the documents he had prepared. Essentially, they divided our investment portfolio equally, avoiding the need to sell assets and incur unnecessary tax liabilities. All that remained was for both Sharon and me to sign the papers. Taking the documents with me, I proceeded to meet my attorney. We discussed the divorce papers he had drafted. I agreed to pursue a no-fault divorce, proposing an equal split of assets if Sharon signed them promptly. However, in case she hesitated, I instructed him to include a provision for filing on grounds of adultery. I felt confident she would sign without delay. With everything arranged, all I needed was a quick dinner before heading to the station for the Monday Night Football broadcast. After leaving the attorney's office, I switched my cell phone back on and found a couple of messages from Sharon. In her messages, she expressed concern about my behavior and urged me to return home to discuss it before the game. Reading her messages, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and disbelief. Despite knowing her plans for the evening, she still reached out with words of love and worry. It dawned on me that I had been incredibly naive to love and trust her so completely. I had made a decision. The only chance of salvaging our marriage was if she didn't show up at the motel tonight. If she chose not to go, it would indicate that she cared enough to try to fix things, recognizing the trouble our marriage was in. At 8 p.m., I engaged the automated system for the evening's broadcast, which meant Monday Night Football was on the air. Concurrently, I prepared to monitor my setup in the motel room remotely. At exactly 8:15, Bob entered the room and made a phone call. "Hey, I've arrived. Can you come over as soon as possible?" he spoke into the phone. "I'll be there shortly," came the reply. After the call ended, he murmured something else, which I noted to review later for details. This could be the end of my marriage, I mused, though I doubted any change in our situation. The pain was real, fueling my resolve for some form of retribution. I went through my list of contacts, reaching out to each one. It took some time, but eventually, I contacted everyone necessary. By that time, Sharon had made it to the motel, so I turned my attention back to the surveillance. Their conversation was deeply personal and intimate, highlighting the complexity and secrecy of their relationship. The depth of their involvement was clear, and the situation was far from what anyone would have expected, especially given their public personas. Listening to them, I felt a mix of emotions. The discovery was shocking, especially considering their roles in the community. It was a moment of realization about the extent of their actions and the implications for all involved. I felt sick. My wife, a pastor, and a church secretary sinking into such depravity. In the moments that followed, I realized just how twisted they were. What they were about to receive tonight, they deserved. They deserved it all. She was on the bed in a compromising position, her posture suggesting readiness for an intimate encounter. The camera caught every detail, including the anticipation visible on her face, just before their interaction became more physical. Her exclamations were filled with mixed emotions, passion, and surprise as she engaged in the moment. "Oh, this is intense," she might have said, her voice reflecting the depth of their engagement. "This is what I needed," she added, affirming her consent and participation. He responded with boldness, perhaps too caught up in the moment. "This will be unforgettable," he claimed, omitting any crass references to me. Her responses to his actions were vocal, a series of sounds that conveyed her intense experience. "Continue. This is what I want," she urged, signaling her nearing peak of emotion. His final movements were decisive, marking a moment of closure for them, a moment that symbolized the end of one chapter for me and the beginning of another, filled with pain and the drive for retribution. After a moment, the scene shifted, showing a continuation of their engagement with renewed energy. Her reactions were vocal and repetitive, indicating the intensity of her experience. It was clear that what transpired was beyond my ability to comprehend fully or match. Her satisfaction was something I could never provide in the way he could. This realization was crushing, highlighting a disparity in our desires and capacities. The performance continued beyond what I could bear to witness. As they paused, presumably for a break, the reality of their connection, and my exclusion from it, sank in deeper. Choosing to act, I switched the broadcast to a mode that would reveal their actions to a wider audience, a decision driven by a mix of hurt and a desire for vindication. As the phone started to ring, signaling the beginning of the fallout, I steeled myself against the incoming storm, ready to face the consequences of exposing a hidden truth. I dialed Sharon's number, my heart pounding as the dial tone echoed through the silent room. On the other end, I could almost picture her, glancing at the caller ID with a dismissive smirk. "It's Dick," Sharon said, presumably to Bob, her voice laced with defiance. "This time I'm not answering. Let's see how he likes that. Keep going, honey, while he's on the line." Frustrated, I disconnected and tried again, my determination growing. This time, Sharon seemed to reconsider, her voice barely audible as she decided, "Guess I better take it," before she fumbled for her phone. "Hello, Dick," she answered, her tone cold and unwelcoming. "Sharon, where are you? What are you up to?" I pressed, seeking any hint of truth in her voice. "I decided to go shopping since you didn't call earlier. Now I'm just grabbing a bite before heading home," she lied smoothly, her words a sharp contrast to the reality I knew. "Shopping at this hour?" I pushed further, skepticism coloring my tone. "Yeah, and I plan to splurge," she shot back, defiance in her voice. "Fantastic, Sharon. Thanks for being such a wonderful wife," I replied, the sarcasm in my voice barely masking the pain. "Don't talk to me like that, you jerk. I don't know what's gotten into you. Goodbye," she snapped, ending the call with a finality that stung. As I pondered their continuing betrayal, a plan formed in my mind. I decided to interrupt their tryst, not with another direct call to Sharon, knowing she wouldn't answer, but by calling the motel directly. "Kevin, it's Dick. Watching Monday Night Football? No? Well, you might want to start. Could you ring the Whirlpool suite for me?" I asked, masking my turmoil with casual conversation. After a brief pause, Bob's voice came through. "Hey, what do you want, Dick?" It was my turn to confront them. "Bastard Bob, let me speak to Sharon, will you?" I demanded, a calm facade over my boiling anger. Sharon's confused voice then joined. "Dick, why are you calling here?" "Sharon, I know everything. The cheating, the lies. I'm filing for divorce and you're getting out. And Bob, you're not getting off easy either," I declared, my voice steady with resolve. "What's wrong with you, Dick? I can't understand you lately," she retorted, her confusion feigned. "It's over, Sharon. Maybe you should tune into Monday Night Football for a change. Enjoy the show." "Goodbye," I said, hanging up, my decision final and my heart heavy with the weight of ending. On the live monitor, I watched her switch on the TV and witnessed the shocking video of her and Bastard Bob. With a delayed reaction, she saw what the entire Atlanta area had witnessed. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," she repeated as she hastily dressed and fled the room. Bastard Bob was eager to leave, cursing all the while. "I will destroy that son of a witch," he muttered. Bastard Bob should watch what he mumbles. It could come back to haunt him. Once they left, I powered down the monitors and let the video play to the end. Then, I switched off the live assist mode and returned the system to fully automated broadcast mode. Grabbing the tape, I left the broadcast booth, likely for the last time, taking a few personal items from my desk. Now, you're caught up. I spent the rest of the night at Frankie's, and yes, my halftime show was the hot topic. After the game, I hailed a cab home. Sharon was sitting in the darkened living room when I arrived, the phone off the hook, tears evident. She wept profusely, but I was indifferent. It was over for me. "How could you do this to me, Dick?" she sobbed. "After all these years together, how?" "No, Sharon," I countered. "The real question is, how could you do this to me?" "I'm drunk. I'm going to bed. We'll talk tomorrow," she said. She remained on the sofa the next morning, looking exhausted. It seemed she hadn't slept, but again, I didn't care. She brought this upon herself. I replaced the phone on the hook, and it immediately began to ring. For the next hour and a half, I fielded calls from family, friends, church members, my former boss, and both of my daughters. They were deeply disturbed by what they witnessed, and nothing I said could soothe them. I understood it was harsh for them to witness, but they're adults and will eventually overcome it. Mrs. Bastard Bob called too, inquiring if I had a tape of the incident. I assured her I kept a copy in safekeeping and would provide it if needed. Clearly, everyone I contacted had seen the Monday Night Football halftime show. Some were upset due to its explicit content, while others, like her parents, criticized me for exposing her. However, Most were supportive and empathetic, recognizing the difficulty of the situation. It was a challenging experience, but a consequence I had to face for my actions. Sharon remained tearful throughout. Eventually, I left the phone off the hook and made myself coffee. Returning, I offered her some and presented the divorce papers and investment documents for her to sign. "I'm filing for divorce, Sharon," I said firmly. "After what I discovered and saw last night, it's clear to me that you've been unfaithful for quite some time. I can't stay in this marriage knowing that. The documents I've prepared are for a no-fault divorce, and I'm proposing we split everything equally. I need you to sign the divorce papers and the agreement on how we'll divide our investments today. There's no room for negotiation on this. The terms I've offered are more than fair. You have until 5 p.m. today to get legal advice and agree to my terms. If you don't, after 5:01 p.m., I'll proceed with filing for divorce on grounds of adultery and aim for a division of property that reflects our individual contributions and earnings, which would largely benefit me. This is your best option. I want to make it clear that contesting this by alleging adultery would be unwise. It will become public knowledge in Atlanta, and you'll be seen for what you've done with Bob. You need to consider this carefully. Sharon, take this offer. It's the best way forward for both of us." "Dick, I still love you. I want to fix our marriage. Can't we try to work things out?" Sharon pleaded. "The problem isn't about love. It's about your choices and actions. You've put someone else before our marriage, and I can't overlook that. You need to sort this out and talk to your lawyer as soon as possible." After some time, Sharon came back with the documents signed. "My lawyer reviewed everything and agrees that your offer is fair under the circumstances," she informed me, her voice carrying a mix of resignation and hope. "Dick, is there any chance we could talk? I'd like to explain my side and see if there's any possibility for us to reconcile," she added, looking for a glimmer of hope. I decided to hear her out, curious about her reasoning and whether this was an isolated incident or indicative of deeper issues in our relationship. We sat at the kitchen table, and she recounted everything to me. There were no others involved. It began shortly before she started working for Bastard Bob. She admitted she didn't know why, as she was content with me, but something about Bastard Bob attracted her, perhaps his charisma. She believed he loved her. I acknowledged his charisma, but shattered her illusion when I played back 2 sound bites I'd saved of him. The first was from that initial day. "That idiotic woman better keep her affair with me hidden from her husband. Despite her sweet and willing nature, she'll be gone soon. It was easy to seduce her, but she needs to go." The second was from just before her arrival. "I'll ravage her tonight and fire her tomorrow. If she protests, I'll threaten to expose her to Dick. I can't risk him finding out." So Sharon, you not only wrecked our marriage but misjudged Bastard Bob's feelings. To him, you were just a toy, a demeaned witch. I saw how he treated you and how you enjoyed it. I never satisfied you like that because I saw you as a loving wife, not a witch. There's no way I can stay married to you. You violated our vows, and I can't ignore that. Plus, you'd never be content with me again. No matter our love, we can't overcome the damage you caused." She remained seated, tears flowing, acknowledging the truth in my words. Eventually, she signed both sets of papers. I informed her I'd be relocating, offering her time to find new accommodations. Financially, I doubted she could maintain the house, and I had no desire to reside there amidst countless memories. Thus, our agreement stipulated the house's sale, with proceeds split equally like our other assets. After collecting my papers and pre-packed bags, I departed, dropping off documents at my broker's before settling in a hotel for the night. The following day, I met with my attorney, who promptly filed the divorce papers with the county's Superior Court. We also addressed my legal woes at the station and with the FCC. He outlined potential consequences, including hefty fines and career repercussions. While jail seemed unlikely, significant financial penalties loomed, signaling an end to my broadcasting career. Within days, repercussions materialized. FCC served me, initiating a legal battle that would drain my savings, amounting to nearly a year's salary. Even worse, my broadcast license got revoked, barring me from my profession for 2 years. The silver lining, however, came from TT, who, despite the illegal and spiteful nature of my actions, offered me a job with responsibilities that complied with FCC restrictions. It turned out TT had sympathy for me, likely influenced by his own bitter divorce experience with Henry's daughter and Peter's sister. I found some appreciation for TT in that regard. Bastard Bob confronted me once at Frankie's, seemingly ready for a physical altercation. However, I ended up pinning him down, asserting my dominance. "Now, Bastard Bob, I don't want to hear from you again. Is that clear?" I asserted. His response? "Forget you." Perhaps he needed another reminder, so I nudged him in the ribs. "Bastard Bob, I have an audio recording of you threatening me. If I take it to the police, I could get a restraining order against you and press assault charges. With that evidence, you might end up in prison. Is that what you want?" I questioned. He shook his head in refusal. As I delivered one final kick for good measure, I remarked, "Well, I suppose this marks the end of our conversation. Although he's no longer a pastor, he's still the same despicable person. He got ousted from the church, and his ordination was revoked by the denomination. Last I heard, he found employment at a city travel agency. Despite his charisma, he'll need to make ends meet, especially since his wife successfully sued him for divorce on grounds of adultery, resulting in a substantial settlement against him. My incriminating tape likely played a significant role in her victory, despite its questionable legality. I'm moving forward with my life. While it's not perfect, I'm discovering ways to find happiness. I've casually dated a few women in recent months, but haven't committed to any serious relationships. I've abstained from sexual activity because I believe in reserving it for marriage, steadfast in my values even if others disagree. When I encounter the right partner, I'll marry her, and together we'll experience the joys of intimacy as intended. I'm patient, confident that the right person will come along in due time, and I'm willing to wait until then. I occasionally encounter Sharon at events like Stephanie's college graduation and Melanie's baby's baptism. While I maintain civility, I've made it clear that my presence isn't for her benefit. I'm not interested in friendship or any form of connection. It's evident that she's not content. I can sense her emotional turmoil stemming from our breakup, and she likely regrets her actions. However, her regret doesn't change the fact that she betrayed our marriage by becoming involved with another man. While some might forgive such transgressions, my moral code is firm, leaving little room for leniency. She'll have to live with the knowledge that she sacrificed a life with me for her affair with Bastard Bob. Despite my profound love for her, she discarded it all. Moreover, her involvement in the infamous Monday Night Football incident has tarnished her reputation irreparably. Everyone who witnessed it now views her as promiscuous. I've heard she receives numerous date offers, but to her credit, she hasn't accepted any. It must be agonizing to know that most of these men view her as nothing more than a conquest. It's not a dignified way to navigate life, but it's a consequence of her actions. She brought it upon herself.
Story 3.
Before my life veered off its predictable course, I never thought much about change. I grew up in a small town where routine was the norm and stability was celebrated. My days blended together: school, chores, a little fun on the weekends. My parents were hardworking, but not particularly affectionate, teaching me to value persistence and sacrifice over emotion. Love seemed like something people read about, not lived. When I met Lila in college, she stood out as someone who wanted more from life. Her vivacious energy, coupled with her laughter that could light up a room, made her irresistible. We married young, full of plans and dreams. Yet those dreams evolved into something neither of us could predict. Marriage became less about partnership and more about endurance as the years dragged on. After 6 years of marriage, I found myself sitting in my recliner, watching my wife, soon to be my ex-wife, walk out the door. The emotions were a blur, too fresh to process. Just this morning, she had asked me to be home by 6 for a talk. When I arrived, the absence of dinner was my first clue something was off. What followed hit much harder. 45 minutes earlier, Lila had come downstairs when she heard me enter. "Hi," she greeted me. "Let's talk in the living room. I have something to say." She didn't waste time. "When we got married, I thought we'd have a good life, but over the last 4 years, I've realized this isn't what I want. You're never around, and when you are, you're too exhausted to be there for me." I cut in. "I work long hours to pay the bills. You have a job, but I don't see much help from your end. My overtime and travel keep us afloat. If you contributed more, I could cut back on the out-of-town work." "You don't help with anything here either," she countered. "You insisted on those flower beds, but I'm the one who ends up taking care of them. And when I don't, you complain after being gone for a week. Why not hire someone to do that, and then maybe we could go dancing? I suggested. She scoffed. With what money? Look, Oliver, I'm done waiting for things to get better. I'm sick of being alone. I want more from life, and you're not giving it to me. I'm sorry, but I'm out. So divorce? I asked, stunned. Yes, 6 months and we'll both be free. Who's paying for this? I asked. I'll cover the court costs, she replied. Fair enough, I said, resigned. She put on her coat and headed for the door. She paused as if to say something, but didn't. I watched her leave, thinking about how pretty she was, and how demanding and self-centered too. Would I miss her? Probably, at least for a while. She was someone to come home to, someone I thought I loved. Now, I wasn't so sure. With nothing in the fridge and no motivation to look, I decided to grab dinner out. As I got into my car, I replayed our conversation. Not once had either of us mentioned the word love. That realization stung. I ended up at Miles's, a bar I hadn't been to in weeks. Lila's decision hurt, but deep down, I knew I'd move on. Sitting at the bar, I remembered my weekly ritual and bought a $5 scratch ticket instead of my usual $1 ones. Feeling bold, I also purchased tickets for the state lottery and Powerball. Machines are probably smarter than me anyway, I joked to Miles as I let the computer pick my numbers. I moved to a booth, had a couple of beers, and avoided thinking about Lila. Later, I stopped at a steakhouse and ordered the smallest steak on the menu, washing it down with more beer. By the end of the night, I felt the alcohol catching up with me. Driving home cautiously, I wondered if Lila had left for good. Most likely, she was at her sister's. Brenda, unlike Lila, had always been kind, but no point in dwelling on the past or her family. Once home, I undressed and remembered the scratch ticket in my pocket. Sitting on the bed, I scratched off the emblems. To my shock, I won $25,000. My excitement grew with each matching cow symbol I uncovered. Laughing, I thought about how this windfall would pay for my freedom. Take that, Lila Grant, I muttered. You can pay for the divorce, but I'll be just fine. Smiling, I locked the bedroom door and went to bed, ready to face a new chapter. If Lila came back, she could take the spare room. As far as I was concerned, the ticket was my only company tonight, and it was enough. The morning started with a tinge of sadness, until I remembered the lottery ticket. That brightened my mood. Deciding to keep it secure, I waited for the bank to open and rented a safe deposit box. I stashed the winning scratch-off ticket and the lottery ticket inside, jotting down the numbers on a scrap of paper I kept in my wallet. My life didn't feel like it was on the brink of major change, but maybe it was too soon to tell. Work demanded my attention, with a flight scheduled for 2 p.m. After finishing some office tasks, I went home at noon to prepare. Lila was still absent. Feeling uneasy, I called her sister Brenda, who informed me that Lila was staying with her. When Lila got on the phone, she reiterated that our relationship was over. She had already left and planned to return soon to collect her belongings. She clarified she wasn't interested in the house, leaving it to me if I chose to take over the mortgage. She only needed a list of assets for her lawyer, but wasn't expecting much, stating she simply wanted to move on with her life. I tried to reason with her, suggesting that we could have resolved our issues, especially since I intended to be home more often soon. She dismissed the idea, admitting she no longer loved me and wanted a fresh start. When I asked if someone else was involved, she denied it but didn't rule out the possibility in the future. Resigned, I acknowledged the end of our marriage and wished her well. I hung up, packed my bag, and headed to the airport. I trusted her to only take what was fair. Respect lingered between us, even if love was long gone. By Saturday, I was halfway across the country, fixing a commercial copier. During lunch, I remembered the state lottery drawing. Checking online, I saw there were no winners. Just my luck. The day stretched on, and by evening, I grabbed dinner and a beer before calling it a night. I'd wait for the Powerball results the next day. When I checked during lunch, I had nothing there either. By Wednesday morning, I was back home. Lila had clearly been by. The house felt emptier. The kitchen table was gone, though she'd left the breakfast stools. A couple of envelopes sat on the counter. One held divorce papers. The other listed everything she'd taken. Skimming it, I felt a pang of irritation. She'd cleared out the entire bedroom, the bed, the nightstands, the bureaus, even the lamps. Upstairs, the bedroom was stripped bare. Down the hall in the guest room, she had neatly organized my things. My clothes were in the dresser. My suits hung in the closet. A note lay on the nightstand. Oliver, I hope this setup works for you. I've moved into an apartment and didn't want to spend too much on furniture. You'll probably want a smaller bed now that you're on your own. To be honest, I hope to share my new bed with someone who will be there every night. Loneliness consumed me every time you left for work, and I couldn't take it anymore. I admit I haven't contributed much financially. I've been saving for a fresh start. You could fight me on it, but is it worth the hassle? I stopped touching our accounts 3 days before I told you I was leaving. That seemed fair to me. If you disagree, we can talk. Brenda thinks I'm making a mistake, but she has Jim. They go to bed together every night and wake up side by side. We never had that. Maybe we just weren't meant to. I could say I still love you, but I don't know if that's true. I'm fond of you, at least. Lila. I set the note down. It was a strange mix of practicality and finality. Lila was gone, and life had already moved on. The next morning, I checked the refrigerator, which was empty and spotless, just like the rest of the house. Lila's thorough departure was clear. I reviewed the divorce papers, which were exactly as she had described, signed them, and slipped them into the stamped envelope she had left. Looking out the window, I noticed the lawn was overgrown, the flower beds needed weeding, and the sprinklers hadn't been turned on. Lila had always envisioned a perfect home, but maintaining it had largely fallen on me. I resolved to simplify things eventually, maybe rip out the flower beds and expand the lawn for easier upkeep. But not today. I went out for dinner and lingered, watching the other diners. A bickering couple, a young pair deeply in love, and families with kids all caught my attention. I wondered where Lila and I might have fit in had we started a family. Later, I stopped at Miles's for a beer, bought some scratch tickets, and updated my lottery numbers. While talking with Miles, I shared the latest developments in my life. He suggested I consider a roommate to help with expenses and housework, but I wasn't sure I could trust someone. Despite everything, I realized I still trusted Lila to act fairly, even as we split. When he asked if I still loved her, I admitted it wasn't love I felt, just the inconvenience of starting over. Thursday morning, I managed to mow the lawn but ignored the flower beds. My neighbors didn't seem to notice Lila's absence, and casual conversations stayed neutral. At Miles's, I bought another Powerball ticket, scratched a $10 winner, and collected my winnings. Miles teased me about keeping track of my profits, and I admitted I was ahead but keeping quiet until the divorce was finalized. I didn't want to risk complications. The weekend brought no lottery wins, but I kept my tickets current before heading out of town for work on Monday. The house felt increasingly dusty and stale, but I planned meals carefully to avoid spoilage while I was away. Sunday night, Brenda called to check in. She mentioned Lila was adjusting but finding expenses higher than expected. Lila had started dating but hadn't found anyone serious. Brenda expressed hope that Lila wouldn't settle out of desperation, and I appreciated her kindness even as I joked about her being too sweet for her own good. Before hanging up, Brenda invited me to visit the family and promised chop suey on Thursday when I returned. I agreed, grateful for the connection, even as I reflected on Lila's complaints of loneliness during our marriage. Had she ever considered that I might have felt the same way? The state lottery jackpot was won on Tuesday, but not by me. As usual, Miles would get a laugh at my expense while still happily selling me more tickets. The Powerball prize had climbed to over $150 million, a number too large to even imagine, but I kept playing. Thursday evening, I joined Brenda for dinner. Lila was also invited, which didn't bother me. Despite everything, we were still curious about each other's new lives. Brenda's kids were all over me, reminding me how much I missed being part of their world. Brenda suggested I visit Lila's condo, but I declined, sensing some disappointment in her response. As I left, Lila walked me to my car. She expressed concern about how her decision to leave might have affected me. I reassured her that while the shock was real, I understood her reasons. I admitted missing her presence more for practical reasons like sharing chores than emotional ones, and I was confident life would move on. Lila seemed relieved, and we parted amicably, with her expressing hope that future encounters would remain comfortable. That night, I stopped by Miles's bar, bought tickets for the next state lottery and Powerball, and went home. The next day promised more yard work, but Miles had other ideas. He mentioned finding a housekeeper for me, a young war widow named Eva with 2 kids who was facing eviction. Despite my initial reluctance, I couldn't ignore the weight of her situation. A winning $1,000 scratch ticket sealed the deal, and I agreed to meet her. By the time I returned to Miles's bar for the meeting, I was too busy with work to dwell on what to expect. I envisioned someone modest and unassuming, but as people entered the bar, I didn't immediately notice anyone who seemed like the woman Miles had described. I waited, unsure of what was ahead, but open to the possibility of something or someone new entering my life. She walked into the bar with a graceful stride, tall and poised, catching my attention despite her understated figure. Settling halfway down the bar, Her pleasant voice carried as she ordered ginger ale. Our eyes met a few times, and on the third, she smiled faintly. I overheard her ask the bartender about Miles, explaining she was supposed to meet someone named Oliver Grant. Realizing it was me, I approached her, introduced myself, and guided her to a booth. I ordered her a refill and my beer to join us. We talked. Eva admitted Miles had painted a dramatic picture of me as a heartbroken man, devastated by my wife's departure. I countered with the truth. While my wife had left, I wasn't wallowing in despair. I explained I was looking for a housekeeper, potentially live-in, since I traveled frequently. She then clarified her own situation. A war widow with 2 children, she was being displaced due to city redevelopment and needed a place to stay. Though she had insurance money and wasn't destitute, finding a suitable home for her and her children was a challenge. She mentioned she was taking her kids to McDonald's that evening, a rare treat for them. Seeing an opportunity, I suggested we go together so I could meet her children. She agreed. At McDonald's, I met her son and daughter, Logan, 6, and Therese, 7. They were polite and well-behaved, clearly a testament to her parenting. Afterward, I took them to see my house. Eva was impressed by the flower beds and even pulled a weed, remarking on her love for gardening. Inside, I showed her the layout and discussed arrangements. Eva insisted that while she and her daughter would share the master bedroom, they'd need separate beds, a full for herself and a twin for Therese. Logan could take the spare room. She hesitated before asking if I expected a physical relationship. I assured her that I had no such intentions and valued clear boundaries to ensure mutual respect and comfort. We discussed finances. I'd cover most expenses, including groceries and utilities, and give her a credit card for household needs. Eva insisted on contributing to the food bill, especially since her children would eat more than I would during my absences. She joked that she seemed to be getting the better end of the deal, given my generosity and lack of demands. Before leaving, Eva asked if I could check her current beds to determine if they were suitable to bring along. She mentioned her daughter's nickname, Tinkerbell, with a warm smile that revealed the affection she had for her children. I agreed, feeling a mix of relief and hope that this arrangement might bring some much-needed life back into my empty house. I couldn't help but smile as I thought about Eva's daughter, Tinkerbell. The nickname suited her perfectly, and while Eva wasn't traditionally attractive, her daughter certainly was. By 10:30, I was at the bar, ready to test Eva's luck with a scratch ticket. I handed it to Miles, challenging him to scratch it himself. To my amusement, it turned out to be a $50 winner. True to our wager, he bought another ticket, but it was a dud. "Oliver, you're a prick," he joked, grinning. Miles then pried about Eva. I dodged the question, teasing him about the lies he'd told us both. Before he could press further, I left without waiting for the lottery drawing. I skipped the bar Saturday, but returned Sunday to grab tickets for the state lottery and Powerball. Miles wasn't working, so he still didn't know if Eva had moved in. Monday morning, I set off for work, planning to return Wednesday evening. Before I left, Eva asked for the house keys, casually mentioning she might stop by to dust. I didn't think much of it, preoccupied with a particularly tricky job. When I pulled into the driveway that evening, I noticed an old Camry parked outside. Stepping inside, the aroma of pot roast greeted me. Eva was in the kitchen, pulling a Dutch oven off the stove. "Hi," she said casually, suggesting I wash up and grab a beer. She had called Miles to ask what I drank, and she'd even tried my usual Genesee Light, calling it sweet but not bad. The table was set with floral-patterned dishes I didn't recognize. When I asked about them, she explained they were wedding gifts she'd barely used. Though her husband was gone, she'd decided it was time to move forward and use them daily. Her voice was steady, but I noticed her eyes glistening. The kids joined us for dinner after playing on the patio. Eva led a short prayer before we ate, saying she preferred to thank the Lord for life's ups and downs rather than complain. The meal was excellent, pot roast with onions, carrots, and potatoes. Partway through, I realized the dining table wasn't there when I'd left on Monday. Eva explained she'd moved in during the week and that this would be their first night in the house. As we finished dinner, Logan commented on the size of my TV. I mentioned my smaller one had gone with Lila. Tinkerbell, curious, asked why my wife wasn't living with me. Eva scolded her gently, but I reassured her it was fine to ask. I explained how Lila and I had grown apart due to my work and agreed to separate amicably. I even directed them to a photo album under the TV if they wanted to see what she looked like. The kids eagerly retrieved it. Tinkerbell studied the pictures, particularly the ones of Lila in a swimsuit, then glanced at her mother. The difference between the two women was obvious. Eva noticed but stayed quiet as I explained who was in other photos, including Lila's sister Brenda and her family. I complimented Eva's cooking, calling it the best meal I'd had in years, which earned me a genuine smile. After dinner, I helped clean up while the kids watched TV. Eva thanked me for the compliment, joking that kids shouldn't think anyone was prettier than their mother. I agreed, but emphasized that beauty wasn't everything, sharing how I'd dated an overweight girl in high school who turned out to be one of the best people I'd ever known. Later, we sat on the patio before I called it a night. Exhausted from traveling, I crawled into bed, appreciating the clean sheets. As I drifted off, I felt a strange sense of comfort and ease, a rare feeling since Lila had left. Thursday morning, I took Eva and the kids downtown to handle a few errands. First, we stopped by the bank, where I added her name to my credit card account. It had an $11,000 limit, which I always paid off monthly. To me, it made sense to ensure she could manage emergencies if I wasn't around, whether it was a broken furnace, a leaking roof, or some other unforeseen expense. Once the paperwork was complete, the bank informed us that new cards, one for each of us, would be mailed shortly. Outside, Ava looked concerned and asked why I'd given her access to such a high-limit card. I explained my reasoning. Emergencies happen, and I don't want you or the kids stranded without options when I'm out of town. This is my house and my responsibility, everything in it, including you and the kids. Don't worry about the limit, just use the card if you need it. I added that I wasn't swimming in cash, but would soon get a raise, which would help manage costs. Eva seemed to relax, giving me a faint smile, though I could tell she was still processing the gesture. As we returned home, I told her I wanted to meet her parents that evening. It'll give me a chance to introduce myself properly, and maybe we can leave the kids with them for an hour or so, I said. She agreed, mentioning that her parents would undoubtedly ask about how I was treating their grandchildren. Then I'll have to be on my best behavior, I joked, and Eva smiled, noting I had already made a good impression. Later, at Miles's bar, he greeted us with his usual brand of humor. "Oliver, I never see you anymore. What's this world coming to? You used to be a regular," he said dramatically. I ordered a beer and suggested a mix of wine and ginger ale for Eva, which she accepted with a laugh. Miles, of course, couldn't resist a jab. "Watch out, Ava. He might try to get you drunk." She rolled her eyes and replied, "Not a chance." I bought my usual scratch ticket and lottery picks, scratching the ticket as Miles handed me my items. The $5 win was small but enough to cover our drinks, prompting Miles to shake his head in mock despair. "He's going to break me someday," he lamented. Afterward, we headed to Eva's parents' house. Her father, tall and lean like her, greeted us warmly, while her shorter, curvier mother quickly caught my attention. I tried not to stare, but she noticed and laughed, teasing. "I know, it's a shame these didn't pass on to my daughter." Eva responded with a grin. "I'd rather avoid the backaches, thank you very much." Their playful banter made it easy to feel at ease. The kids were soon yawning, so I carried Logan to the car, his head resting heavily on my shoulder. By the time we got home, both kids were sound asleep, and Eva tucked them into bed. Meanwhile, I settled in front of the TV to watch a country music show featuring Dolly Parton. Eva wandered in, catching me mid-watch, and smirked. "What is it with men and women's bosoms?" she quipped. "I'm calling Mom to let her know what you're watching." Half an hour later, she returned with a playful glint in her eye. "Mom says I should make you marry me. She even joked she wishes she were single." Laughing, I replied, "Well, I must have made quite the impression." Eva quickly dismissed the notion of marriage, reminding me she was just the housekeeper. I pushed back gently. "You're more than that. In just a week, you've made this house feel alive again. I can't remember the last time I felt this comfortable." She gave me a quiet smile but didn't argue. The next few days passed smoothly. I was home every evening, greeted by the smell of home-cooked meals and the sight of the kids excitedly playing on the new swing set and jungle gym I had installed in the backyard. Eva had kept the yard in perfect shape, the flower beds meticulously weeded. When I commented on her work, she mentioned she had more free time now, that her freelance editing was slow. "Not having to scramble for rent is a godsend," she admitted. On Thursday morning, as I prepared to leave for work, Eva casually mentioned she had a dinner date Friday night and asked if I could watch the kids. Though her words were matter of fact, they hit me harder than I expected. My chest tightened, but I masked my reaction with a smile. "Of course," I said lightly, suggesting we have a pizza and movie night. "The kids and I will have our own little party." She seemed relieved and thanked me, but as I left for work, I couldn't shake the sharp sting of jealousy. We'd never discussed dating others, and I just assumed that if either of us went out, it would be together. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to quiet my thoughts. By morning, I was irritable, and Ava noticed. When she asked if something was wrong, I deflected, blaming a difficult machine repair at work. Though she seemed to accept my explanation, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something between us had shifted. Friday evening, I got home earlier than usual. Eva was already dressed for her evening plans, wearing a sleek black dress with her hair elegantly styled. She'd even made subtle enhancements to her figure, and the effect was stunning. She looked radiant, clearly waiting for me to notice. "You look amazing, Eva," I said. She smiled confidently. "I know, I feel like a queen tonight. Maybe I'll have to go out more often." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. The pizza delivery had arrived, and as I set it down, the bell rang again. This time, a well-dressed man about 10 years older than Eva stood at the door. He was driving a Mercedes, which was parked at the curb. Eva introduced him as Richard Tromley, her employer. She mentioned that he had been kind to her over the past 2 years, and occasionally invited her out. I shook his hand, introducing myself, but the moment felt awkward. Eva turned back to me before leaving. "Make sure the kids are in bed on time." "I might be late, so don't wait up," she said before heading out with Richard. I stood there, feeling a pang I couldn't quite explain. Jealousy wasn't something I'd experienced often, not even when Lila used to go out for work events. But this was different. I reminded myself that Eva was just my housekeeper, someone I barely knew. Still, the discomfort lingered. Needing a distraction, I called Brenda. "Hey, I had some swings put in the backyard for some kids who are staying here. Bring yours over tomorrow to try them out," I said. Brenda laughed. "What's new with you?" "Not much. The kids belong to the woman who helps with the house. She's out tonight, so I'm watching them. They're about the same age as Simon and Pearl." "Why aren't you dating your housekeeper?" "You know Lila's dating, right? She's even staying over sometimes. Does that bother you?" "Not at all. I'll be dating soon enough. I have an office full of secretaries to choose from." "What about Eva?" "Not a chance. I'd rather not complicate things. Besides, she has kids." "You've always wanted kids, Oliver. You adore Simon and Pearl." "True, and these two are well behaved. But I need to focus on other things right now." Brenda pressed me for more details, eventually convincing me to host a cookout the next day so she could meet Ava. I agreed and hung up, laughing at her persistence. That evening, I spent time with Logan and Tinkerbell watching Shrek before tucking them into bed. As I kissed Tinkerbell goodnight, she asked, "Oliver, can I have a goodnight kiss?" "My friend says her daddy always kisses her goodnight. Mommy kisses me, but nobody kisses her. I think she'd like to be kissed too." Her innocent words left me smiling. "Good night, sweetheart. Sleep tight," I said, gently kissing her forehead. Later, I waited for Ava to return. By midnight, she still wasn't home. I went to bed, unable to stop imagining where she might be or what she might be doing. When she finally came in at 1:30 a.m., I pretended to be asleep, unwilling to confront her. The next morning, I left early for breakfast at IHOP and then headed to the office, even though it was Saturday. At 10 a.m., I called the house. Eva answered, excitedly saying she wanted to tell me about her evening. She sounded genuinely happy, sharing that she'd had a wonderful time. I invited her to join me for a light lunch, letting her know Brenda and her family would be coming over for a cookout later. When I got home, she had prepared tomato soup and cucumber sandwiches. Sitting down, she explained the night before. She'd attended a formal dinner and awards ceremony for the magazine she freelanced for. It had been her first invitation to such an event, and she was thrilled to have been recognized as the most dedicated part-time editor. After the dinner, there was a dance and storytelling session that lasted until midnight. She apologized for not calling, assuming I would be fine with the kids. Relieved, I said, "Oh, that's great. I didn't realize it was a work event. I thought it was just a date with your boss." Ava's expression shifted. "A date? Why would you think that?" "Well, you didn't explain much. You got dressed up, an older man picked you up in a fancy car, and you said you'd be home by 11. Next time, maybe it'd be a little clearer so I don't worry." She softened. "You were worried about me." I shrugged, trying to brush it off. "Not really. You're an adult. You can take care of yourself." Ava smiled knowingly. "Still, I think you were worried. That's sweet of you." Neither of us seemed eager to continue the conversation. Instead, we quietly shifted back into the routine of the day, leaving the unresolved feelings unspoken. I glanced at photos of Brenda and thought she was strikingly beautiful. It crossed my mind how stunning Eva had looked the night before, though I didn't say it aloud. Later, I went outside to clean the grill, and Eva took charge of marinating the steaks, deciding how she wanted them prepared. While we worked in the kitchen, Ava mentioned hearing about the goodnight kiss I had given Tinkerbell. She seemed happy about it, expressing how much it meant for Tinkerbell to have moments like that, especially after missing out on a father's affection. She also noted how I had been attentive to Logan, which made her appreciate Miles even more for connecting us. I couldn't help but wonder why she hadn't considered thanking me the same way. That afternoon, Brenda came by and quickly hit it off with Eva. Pearl and Simon began visiting often, and the house grew livelier. Sometimes I would return home to find Eva the only one there to welcome me, but her presence always felt warm and inviting. One day, I ran into Lila at the grocery store. We ended up chatting for over an hour, weaving around shoppers as we blocked the aisle. Lila seemed content and admitted she had made the right choice in leaving. She mentioned meeting someone and hinted at moving in with him, but assured me it wouldn't create any issues between us. I reassured her I was in a good place, though I joked that her new relationship was likely more intimate than anything in my life at the moment. Lila, in turn, brought up Brenda's impression of Eva and how she believed there could be something deeper between us if I gave it a chance. Lila seemed genuinely happy for me, even congratulating me on an upcoming raise and joking about the time we spent figuring out we weren't meant for each other. As we parted ways, I realized I didn't miss her at all. That evening, I stopped by Miles's bar to grab my usual tickets, but for the first time in months, my scratch ticket wasn't a winner. Miles found it amusing and teased me about my streak ending, even asking when I'd finally take things further with Eva. His remarks, while lighthearted, stuck with me. When I arrived home, I overheard Eva talking to her mother in the living room. The kids were staying at her parents' house for the night. Eva's voice carried as she shared how much she valued having me in her life, even admitting she felt more strongly about me than she had about her late husband. She hesitated, saying she couldn't simply act on those feelings because she respected my boundaries, though she entertained the idea of doing something special on my birthday. Hearing her words, I couldn't stay silent. I walked into the room and placed my hands on her shoulders, startling her as she ended the call. Her surprised expression softened as I leaned down to kiss her. The house was quiet with the kids away, and the moment between us quickly escalated. Eva shed her hesitations, as well as her blouse, and for the first time, the barriers we had both been holding on to came down. Though she voiced a desire for more than a fleeting connection, the night unfolded with an intensity neither of us had anticipated. We didn't even make it upstairs at first, caught in the moment before eventually finding our way to bed. The night marked a turning point, something unspoken, yet profoundly felt by both of us. By morning, everything seemed both new and inevitable, as if it had always been meant to happen. The light streaming through the window woke me. It took me a second to remember where I was, her bed. This was only the second time I'd stepped into Eva's bedroom, the first being to tuck Tinkerbell in and kiss her goodnight. But waking up here now, with the faint scent of her lingering in the sheets, filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. It was more comforting than my own bed had been for a long time, probably since Lila and I started drifting apart 2 years ago. I pulled myself out of bed, made my way to the kitchen, and started the coffee. As the rich aroma filled the air, Eva came in and sat down at the table. She didn't need to say much for me to understand what was on her mind. I could see it in her eyes, the weight of an unspoken question that had lingered since last night. Did I mean it when I told her I loved her? It wasn't the kind of thing I said lightly, not even in the heat of the moment. I did love her. I loved the kids. I loved waking up in a home that felt whole again. I told her as much, my words straightforward and from the heart. It felt good to talk about the little things after that. She mentioned her raise at work, and I reassured her that things were financially steady on my end. The truth was, I was doing better now than when Lila left. Eva's face lit up when I told her I'd be traveling less for work. She said the kids would be thrilled, and I believed her. Even she admitted how much she hated my being gone, how empty the house felt without me. I didn't need her to tell me that the kids noticed everything, including how happy she was when I was around. But for now, we agreed to keep the more intimate details of our relationship from them. They didn't need to know yet. Eva left to pick up the kids while I stayed behind, enjoying the quiet for a little longer. I poured myself another cup of coffee and flipped on the TV. The news was on, and I caught a segment that stopped me cold. Miles's bar, my regular spot, had sold one of the winning state lottery tickets. The jackpot was $3.2 million, split between 2 winners. The numbers flashed on the screen, and I knew them instantly. They were mine. My mind raced. Miles knew I played the same numbers religiously. He'd figure it out, but I trusted him to keep quiet until I had a chance to talk to him. The payout, $1.6 million over 20 years, wasn't earth-shattering, but it was solid. It was a future I could plan for. Still, I wasn't going to tell Eva. Not yet. I hadn't even told her about the scratch ticket stashed in the bank deposit box. Timing mattered, and I didn't want this news to change anything between us right now. By the time Eva and the kids returned, I was nursing my third beer. She gave me a look that was equal parts amused and curious. Drinking in the morning wasn't my style, and she called me out on it. I laughed, brushing it off as a celebration, though I didn't elaborate. That little moment of humor carried through the day. The kids didn't understand why we were all laughing, but it didn't matter. The house was full of life, and for the first time in a while, I felt like things were exactly as they should be. That night after dinner, I told Eva I was heading over to Miles's to grab a scratch ticket. She teased me about celebrating, but she didn't mind. What she didn't know was that I needed to talk to Miles about the lottery ticket. The bar was packed when I arrived, buzzing with excitement over the big win. Miles caught my eye and gave me a grin when he had a free moment. He knew I'd put his bar on the map, and he was thrilled. I got straight to the point, asking him if he had to reveal who bought the winning ticket. He reassured me that he didn't and promised to keep it to himself, at least for now. He warned me that people would start speculating, but I could live with that. Before I left, Miles gave me a knowing look. He mentioned Eva, hinting that I didn't need to work too hard to win her over. He had no idea how far things had already progressed, but when he figured it out, he just laughed and congratulated me. As I walked home, the weight of the day's events settled over me. The lottery win, Eva, the kids. It was a lot to take in. But for the first time in years, I felt like life wasn't just happening to me. I had something to look forward to, something real. I scratched my ticket again, reclaiming a modest $2 win. With no beer on my breath, I went home feeling like things were finally falling into place. Life settled into a steady rhythm. The kids attended school, Eva began receiving more editing assignments, and my job brought me new responsibilities. Despite the increased workload, I was home nearly every night, and that made all the difference. On my 20th birthday, Lila made an appearance. I welcomed her warmly and was introduced to her new boyfriend, Thomas Davis. He worked in construction, an occupation I hadn't expected for her partner. I always thought Lila would choose someone with a more prestigious career, but it was clear that didn't matter to her. They were deeply in love, and that was enough. Somehow, word spread during the evening's celebration, and by the time the guests began to leave, every adult in the room seemed to know I was romantically involved with my housekeeper. I suspected my future mother-in-law had let it slip. As Lila was leaving, she stopped to share a parting thought. She admitted she adored Eva's children, but wouldn't have imagined Eva as a match for me. Still, she acknowledged our happiness and asked if it was a lasting arrangement. I confirmed it was, explaining how working locally and being home every night had brought Eva and me closer. I even told her I understood why she had left and wished her well with Thomas. Her response was gracious, saying my words had earned me an invitation to their upcoming wedding. Professionally, my life took a turn when I was assigned a personal secretary. Vivian was young, stunning, and quick-witted, and her presence stirred a few complications I hadn't anticipated. When a sudden trip to the company headquarters arose, I was too busy to handle my travel preparations. Without much thought, I sent Vivian to my house to retrieve my bags. This decision proved to be a mistake. Eva's jealousy flared as soon as Vivian arrived, though I was oblivious at the time. Upon my return, Eva's behavior was cold and distant. She avoided conversation, let alone any affection. I sensed something was wrong, but it wasn't until the kids were asleep and the house was quiet that I decided to address it. I knocked on her door, determined to figure out the cause of her frustration. She was blunt, accusing me of being unfaithful during my trip. Her suspicions stemmed from Vivian's mention of our adjoining hotel rooms with interconnecting doors. I immediately set the record straight. The shared rooms were a matter of practicality for work, nothing more. I reminded Eva of a similar situation when she had gone on a platonic date with her boss and how I had trusted her completely. I took her hand and led her to my room, where I stripped down, hoping to reassure her with honesty and vulnerability. Reluctantly, she allowed me to explain further. Vivian, I revealed, had confessed early in our working relationship that she wasn't interested in men. She put on a flirty facade as a professional cover, but her significant other, Sophie, was just as striking as she was. The shared hotel rooms were strictly for after-hours productivity. Eva's tension began to melt away, though she was still skeptical. I reassured her, pointing out that she had nothing to fear from Vivian, and added a bit of humor. Vivian would likely joke at our wedding about losing the best thing that ever happened to her. It was all an act, nothing more. With that, Eva finally softened, admitting the pain of her jealousy had been unbearable. She promised not to let it consume her again, and for the first time in days, she climbed into bed beside me. That night, we rekindled the connection that had felt so strained just hours before. Our wedding was planned for the last Saturday in November, a cozy morning ceremony at Miles's bar. Miles generously offered us the space until 4 p.m. for the reception. Brenda would serve as matron of honor, with Tinkerbell and Pearl as attendants, while Miles stood by me as best man, joined by Logan and Simon. To make room for dancing after the catered meal, the bar's tables would be removed. It was shaping up to be a day filled with love, laughter, and celebration, a fitting start to the next chapter of our lives together. I had a small family, and Ava's only close relatives were her parents. For the wedding, Eva invited 3 of her colleagues from the magazine, including her boss and his wife, who couldn't stop laughing at the fact that I'd once been jealous of him. Earlier that summer, I had extended invitations to several of my coworkers, a mix of men and women. Brenda, Jim, and their kids were delighted to see I had stayed close to them, just as I had when I was married to Lila. Including Brenda and her children in the wedding ceremony as part of Eva's circle further solidified our enduring friendship. Lila returned her RSVP, stating that she and Thomas would attend. She signed the note as Mrs. Thomas Davis, revealing they had tied the knot at City Hall 2 days prior. I couldn't help but wonder why she hadn't invited me to her wedding. The highlight of the day for Eva and me came when we realized how much we both loved polka dancing. We practiced a few intricate moves together and discovered dancing could become a hobby we'd both enjoy. Meanwhile, Vivian and her partner Sophie were indulging in drinks, with Vivian her usual flirtatious self. She intercepted me on my way back from the restroom, insisting I dance with her to discuss something. As the band began a waltz, I half supported Vivian, who was clearly tipsy, as we made our way onto the dance floor. She confided that Sophie wanted her to come out publicly and suggested I announce it during a toast. I made sure she understood the implications. There would be no turning back once it was said aloud. Vivian confirmed she was ready, especially since they planned to marry in Massachusetts over the New Year holiday. Returning to the head table, I called for everyone's attention by tapping a knife against my glass. Standing between Vivian and Sophie, I began my announcement. I joked that Vivian, often the object of office daydreams and the most attractive woman in our workplace, had chosen her life partner, meaning her colleagues would no longer have a chance at her affections. Then I invited her to share a kiss with the one she loved. The room fell silent for a moment as Vivian and Sophie kissed, before applause drowned out an initial murmur of, "What a waste." The couple stepped apart, and I offered my congratulations with a hug. Eva joined in, embracing Vivian while I hugged Sophie. Soon, a line formed as guests came forward to share their well wishes. Later, Eva and I danced a few more times before preparing to leave for our honeymoon. Lila approached, asking for one last dance with her ex-husband. I agreed, and as we moved across the floor, she opened up. She reflected on her decision to leave and admitted she believed it had been best for both of us. She commented on how happy I seemed and confessed she had initially thought Eva wasn't attractive. However, after seeing Eva that night, Lila admitted she was beautiful and an excellent dancer. As the conversation turned reflective, Lila stopped herself from asking a personal question, realizing it might hurt both of us. Instead, she wished me well, and we agreed to remain friends. Before leaving Miles' bar, I bought a scratch ticket, which netted me $5. A small but amusing gesture to cap off the day. Settling into married life with Eva felt profoundly different from my first marriage. Eva treated me with a respect I had never received from Lila, and we shared a deep sense of mutual happiness. Vivian and Sophie returned from their wedding, radiating the joy of newlyweds. While Vivian's absence from office flirtations was noted, everyone supported their relationship. The couple spent a lot of time with Eva in the weeks following their marriage. Although Eva was initially concerned about their frequent visits, I reassured her that they were simply adjusting to being open about their relationship and would eventually need less support. A few months into our marriage, I decided it was time to share some financial news with Eva. She had taken over managing our household budget, so I asked her about our current net worth. After she showed me her calculations, I casually mentioned we could add $80,000 to her figures. Confused, she asked what I meant. I explained that I had been holding on to a winning lottery ticket, the one Miles's bar had sold, but no one had claimed. I had kept it in the bank all this time and planned to cash it in. Eva was shocked, but curious why I had waited so long. I admitted that when I won, we were only separated, and I didn't want the money to complicate things with Lila or influence my growing relationship with Eva. Looking back, I doubted Lila would have made any claim, but I hadn't wanted to risk it then. Ava processed the revelation and asked how much the winnings were worth. I told her it was $80,000 a year for 20 years, though taxes would take a portion. She wondered how we would handle the money and whether it might change us. I assured her it wouldn't affect who I was or my love for my work and colleagues. Eva shared my excitement, though she braced herself for the inevitable media attention and unsolicited requests for money. We reminisced about the night I won, realizing it was the same night I had come home and confidently embraced her for the first time. She teased me, saying the lottery had given me the courage I needed. We laughed about how the initial chaos of public interest eventually settled, leaving us to enjoy our lives in peace. Miles continued selling me scratch tickets twice a week and a Powerball ticket for each drawing. He often teased me about my persistence. "Why bother? Lightning doesn't strike twice," he'd say, shaking his head. "Why not just buy a whole roll of those scratch tickets if you're so set on playing? You've got the money for it." I'd shrug and reply that while I could afford to play more, I wasn't greedy. I enjoyed the occasional win on the scratch tickets and didn't want to mess with my streak. Miles would snort and return to wiping the bar. Life couldn't have been better. Our neighborhood was a perfect fit, and the house sat on a lot large enough for expansion. We'd have to sacrifice some of the sprawling flower beds Lila had planted, but I didn't mind. Those beds had been her passion, not mine, and with her gone, it felt right to let them go as well. Being home every evening and Eva working from home meant we'd grown more social with the neighbors. Monthly get-togethers became a tradition, and though Brenda and Jim lived a little farther away, they were always included. Lila, still friendly with many in the neighborhood, often attended too. Brenda informed us one day that Lila and Thomas were expecting a baby. Apparently, the pregnancy had been well underway before their wedding. Though Eva and Lila knew each other, they weren't close, and I suspected that my previous marriage to Lila kept them from being real friends. By Lila's 8th month, disaster struck. Thomas fell from a 20-foot scaffold at work, shattering his hip. Unable to work for months and with only workers' comp to rely on, they were struggling financially. The neighborhood rallied, organizing a baby shower to support them. Alongside traditional baby gifts, someone suggested scratch tickets as a creative addition. I wrestled with a decision. Could I give Lila a substantial amount of money that Eva didn't even know I had? It felt wrong to keep it a secret from her. I decided to come clean. "Eva, I need to tell you about something involving money," I began cautiously. She raised an eyebrow. "Does this affect me now?" "In a way, yes. But I want you to make the final call," I explained before telling her the story. On the night Lila had told me she wanted a divorce and left, I'd gone to Miles's bar and bought a scratch ticket. It turned out to be a big winner, $25,000. I'd never cashed it and had kept it in the bank ever since. The ticket had to be redeemed within 2 months. Eva was quiet for a moment before connecting the dots. "You're thinking about giving it to Lila, aren't you?" I nodded. "What do you think?" Her response was thoughtful. "Go get it. Add 5 more scratch tickets from Miles and I'll put everything in an envelope for the shower. I'll handle giving it to her. She'll never know it came from you." Ava's excitement grew. "What were your thoughts when you first realized you'd won so much money?" I laughed. It's funny now, but that night I'd had more beer than usual, and it was the first time I'd gone to bed without Lila there. I remember thinking I had no wife to keep me warm, just a ticket. Then I panicked, worrying she might get her hands on it. Silly, right? "No, not silly. I think it was kind of sweet. Lila's going to be thrilled," she said with a grin. The evening of the shower, Eva sent me to hang out at Miles' bar until she got home. I bought my usual scratch ticket, which was a dud, and my Powerball ticket. Nursing a beer, I stayed until nearly 11 before heading home. Eva came in around midnight, buzzing with excitement. "Lila cried," she told me. At first, she didn't understand why someone gave her a ticket that was already scratched. Once she figured it out, we all went to Miles's to cash them in. She left with $27,304, enough to get them through until Thomas can work again. "No one suspects it was from you. I'm so glad we did this." Then she paused and added, "I have some news too. I took a pregnancy test this morning." Though tired and ready for bed, her words jolted me wide awake. Later, as we came out of the shower, Ava mentioned something that caught my attention. "Miles seemed a little odd as we left. He told me to make sure you checked your Powerball numbers before going to bed. Apparently, it's a big jackpot tonight. $275 million. Where's your ticket?" Life is a strange mix of unexpected turns, isn't it? That night, when Eva mentioned the Powerball numbers, I remember fishing out the ticket from the pile of papers on the counter, almost absent-mindedly. I grabbed my phone to check the results, a mix of curiosity and skepticism running through me. I didn't expect much. It was just another ticket, another day. But as the numbers came into focus on my screen, my heart stopped. They matched. Every single one. I sat there in stunned silence, the enormity of it refusing to sink in. $275 million. A sum so large it felt more like a story I was reading than my own reality. Ava noticed my expression before I said a word. She leaned over my shoulder, her breath catching as she saw the numbers too. "Are you serious?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I could only nod. We stayed like that for a long moment, the weight of what this could mean filling the room. Then, almost as if breaking a spell, she grabbed my hand and pulled me into the living room. We laughed, cried, and danced in the moonlight, like kids who'd found the ultimate treasure. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I reached out to a financial advisor to navigate the complexities of the winnings, ensuring we kept a low profile while deciding how to use the money. Eva and I agreed on a few principles early on. We wouldn't let this change who we were, and we'd use the windfall to build a future that mattered, not just for us, but for those we cared about. We paid off the house, expanded the backyard, and made it a haven for Logan, Tinkerbell, and the growing family we were building. Brenda and Jim were among the first to benefit, with an anonymous donation to help their kids through college. Miles received an upgraded bar with a refurbished kitchen and a new sound system, a way to give back to the place that had been a constant in my life. As for Lila and Thomas, they received more help than they ever expected, though they never knew it came from me. Eva and I agreed it was better that way. They deserved a fresh start, just as we had found ours. The rest of the money went into investments, charities, and creating experiences that brought joy and meaning to our lives. We traveled, explored, and learned together as a family. Eva continued her freelance editing, though she took on fewer projects to focus on our home. I scaled back my work even further, choosing assignments that allowed me to be home most nights. Our wedding anniversary became a celebration not just of our love, but of the life we had built together, a life filled with laughter, love, and a deep sense of gratitude. Every now and then, I'd stop by Miles's bar, buying my usual scratch tickets and sipping a beer, smiling at the life I never could have imagined. And yet, through it all, the most valuable thing wasn't the money. It was the moments, the quiet mornings with Eva, the laughter of the kids playing in the yard, the feeling of coming home to a house that wasn't just a place, but a sanctuary. Winning the lottery was luck. Finding love again, building a family, that was the real jackpot.
Story 4.
My parents sold my boyfriend's car, mistaking it for mine, to pay for my sister's post-divorce self-care vacation. Now I'm left to clean up the mess. I, 26, female, drove to my parents' house in my boyfriend's new SUV because it's a pretty sweet ride, and I really wanted to go on a long drive in it. My boyfriend Tyler, 28, male, had been saving up for a really long time to buy a new car, and he has had this one for almost 2 months now. He and I have been together for 2 years, and last month, he moved in with me. My parents live quite far away from me. It's usually a 6-hour drive from my place to theirs, and we meet maybe just once or twice a month. Last weekend, they had invited me over to stay for a couple of days with them since my dad was not doing well because his heart was acting up again. I decided to take the new car after talking to Tyler about it because my old car was in the shop for repairs. I didn't tell my parents about it being Tyler's car because I didn't think it was relevant. When they asked me whose it was, since they seemed pretty impressed by it, I just told them it was mine. I didn't know what it would lead to. I couldn't have possibly thought that they would sell it. Anyway, on the 4th day of my visit, I had gone to meet a friend, and when I came back, the car was gone. I started panicking immediately because I thought it was stolen, but when I went inside to speak to my parents about it, they told me that they had sold the car. I was shocked, and they explained that when I had shown up with the car, they decided to take a couple of photos of it and sent them to a bunch of their friends to ask if anybody would be willing to buy it. And one of them had found an interested buyer who was willing to pay quite a sum for the car. I honestly don't know what kind of idiot would buy a car without bothering to have the title of the car signed over to them. But I guess they were able to find somebody who was foolish enough or maybe desperate enough to do that. When I asked them what they had done with the money, they told me that they had transferred the funds to my sister so she could take a well-deserved break because her divorce had just been finalized a couple of weeks back. And she needed to indulge herself in some self-care. They had even ordered a pair of diamond earrings and a bracelet for her online. They asked me not to be mad, but clearly, since I had bought the car, I was doing really well. And my sister had blown a lot of money on the divorce, so she really needed this. They could have paid for it with their own money, but they had to save for retirement as well, so they really expected me to be understanding of this and why they had done it. I was so furious that I didn't even know what to say to them, and I just started screaming in their faces, telling them that they had screwed up big time because the car wasn't even mine. It belonged to Tyler, and they would hear from him once he found out about this. My parents had met Tyler a couple of times, but they were definitely not close, so even they received a shock when they found out that the car belonged to him and not me. But instead of being apologetic, they started freaking out and blaming me for not telling them the truth about who the car belonged to. They said that because of my decision to fake it, they had endangered themselves, and quite possibly the person who had offered to buy that car. Apparently, they had planned on selling the car without my knowledge, and once I found out about it, they would just convince me not to press charges against them, and that would be it. But now, since they found out that the car didn't even belong to me in the first place, they were scared of what was going to happen, and started bugging me to talk to Tyler and convince him not to press charges. They claimed that they had been fully convinced that I would not do anything to hurt them, and that's why they had sold the car when they thought it was mine, which is just insane. I don't even know how to make sense of that. Essentially, they were planning on taking advantage of the fact that I was family, and they were going to emotionally manipulate me into letting this slide. But with Tyler, they were not so confident and wanted me to do something to fix the situation. I told them that they could just contact the person who had bought the car and have him return it as is. But they said that they had already sold it and transferred the funds to my sister, so that was not going to be possible. The only reason I was even negotiating with them was not that I wanted to protect them, but because I wanted the car back, because I knew how hard Tyler had worked for it. The fact that my parents were still trying to defend the decision of selling the car for my sister's sake was pissing me off. So I told them that if they didn't do what I asked them to, then I would talk to Tyler and make sure that he pressed charges against them. And then we were at a stalemate because they thought that I was being too cruel and that my sister had really been through a lot, so she deserved this vacation and the gifts that they had ordered for her. They claimed that she had been really happy when they had transferred the money to her and told her to take a vacation with that money, and had even mentioned the gift that she would be receiving once she came back home. They couldn't take that happiness away by telling her that they had canceled the gifts and she would need to return the money as well. So I told them that I couldn't care less about her happiness. I just needed the money back or the car, and if they didn't do it, I would speak to Tyler. They said that they knew I wouldn't do anything to hurt them, so I got my phone right in front of them, called Tyler, and explained the situation to him while they just looked horrified. I told Tyler that I wanted him to press charges against my parents. I was very pissed off, and I could hear that even Tyler was very upset, so he told me that he was going to speak to his lawyer and do something about this. After the phone call, my parents started screaming at me once again, and pushed me out of their house, saying that I was a horrible human being and that I did not deserve to be called their daughter anymore. I was fine with that. But then they started saying that none of this would have even happened if I had just told them that the car did not belong to me, but instead I had chosen to lie about it. And now they were in trouble because of me. They said that I was just insecure that my boyfriend had a brand new shiny car and I couldn't afford to have the same. Which is why I was trying to show off in front of them to impress them because they knew that I was just going to amount to a failure and nothing else. They had been right about it their entire life, and I couldn't stand that. I found that very offensive when I tried to argue that I wouldn't even have brought the car with me if I had known what they had in mind. But they said that they had only sold the car because they thought that I was family and that I would understand their predicament. But clearly, I was only interested in faking my lifestyle to impress other people. That was almost 3 days back, and since then, I have been living in a hotel, waiting for Tyler to show up here. We have been in touch, but I just can't help thinking that maybe this is my fault because I didn't tell my parents who the car actually belongs to. So, AITA for telling my parents that my boyfriend's car was mine when I visited them? Edit. Many of you wanted to know more about my relationship with my family. Well, as most of you might have figured out by now, there is a golden child in the family, and it's obviously not me, it's my oldest sister. She is 7 years older than me, and I don't have a good relationship with her. We have had no contact for the past couple of years, and it's not something that we decided on purpose. It's just something that happened organically. She lives out of state and rarely ever comes back home, and when she does, I don't visit my parents then because we don't get along. My childhood was not that bad, to be honest. Even though my parents were kind of biased towards my sister, I never felt like I was being sidelined or anything. This car incident just came out of nowhere. I had no idea that they were capable of doing something so crazy. Trust me, if they had treated me badly my entire life, I wouldn't even have stayed in touch with them earlier. It was only little things that used to bother me about my relationship with my parents, but they were very kind to me otherwise and were good parents overall. And that's why I stayed in touch with them and visited them every month. This recent incident, though, just came out of nowhere. I think they're getting old and senile, and that's why they thought that this would be something acceptable and I would just let it slide because I was family or whatever. They were wrong, though. Even the things that they had said towards the very end of our last meeting, while they were pushing me out of the house. That they had always believed I was a failure, and I wanted to prove them wrong. I don't know where that came from either, because they've always been very supportive of me. They had never implied that I would grow up to be a failure. Maybe they believed it in their hearts, but they never let it show and were very good actors because I had been totally convinced that they loved me. This whole incident was the first one that was completely out of the blue, and I don't know what could have possibly driven my parents to act this crazy. I mean, I know that my sister's divorce was pretty bad. Her husband had been cheating on her and had still managed to get away with it without paying her alimony and only giving her a dismal amount of settlement money. But still, that's not an excuse for my parents to act like this. Anyway, I hope that helps you guys make sense of why I had to stay in touch with my parents and come to a conclusion about what I should do. It's kind of urgent, so I would appreciate quick advice. Update 1. Hey, so yesterday after I posted my update, most people told me that I had absolutely no fault in this. I did not want my parents asking questions about what Tyler had done with his car and stuff, so I just decided to tell them one white lie. There was literally no way I could have known that it would lead to all of this, and I don't need to beat myself up about it. And yes, my parents might have treated me decently in the past, but after what they have just pulled, I don't owe them anything. Tyler showed up this morning, and he told me the same thing that people in the comments have been telling me. I don't need to feel regret or guilt related to any of this. He's going to deal with this in his own way. And all I have to do is testify against my parents because he has had his lawyers draw up papers for a lawsuit and is pressing charges against my parents. And you know what? I'm going to be with him on this. They totally deserve whatever's coming to them, and they cannot dodge the consequences of this. In the evening, we plan on going to my parents' house and talking to them, giving them one last chance to fix their mistake. But I highly doubt that they're going to do it. Their only priority right now is making sure that my sister gets to indulge herself. I already tried reasoning with them earlier, but they were not receptive to it. If anything, I'm pretty sure that they're just going to feed me the same BS this time as well. But Tyler thinks that it's worth a try because he doesn't want to waste his time fighting this in court when he can just settle it outside of court. If they don't do as we say, then we will have to take this to court. It has been a couple of days. So even they might have lawyered up by now. And I'm pretty sure that they're cooking up some lie against me to make them seem like the good guys here. But I know what happened, and all I really need is just the contact number of the guy who bought the car, and I will be able to sort this out in a jiffy. Anyway, since I don't have that right now, we are just going to have to suck it up and talk to them one last time so that we can tell them how bad it's going to end up for them if they don't get the car back at any cost. The one good thing that has happened so far is that Tyler is here with me, so I feel much less stressed out about everything. He has been very kind and compassionate towards me because he knows that this is not my fault, and if anyone is to blame here, it's going to be my parents. Update 2. Okay, so a couple of things have happened. As I said, we went to my parents' house to speak to them and told them that we were giving them one last chance to fix the situation. But just as we had expected, they did not take us up on that offer. When we rang the doorbell and my dad opened the door to see us, he told me that he knew that he could count on me to realize that what we were doing by getting them into trouble was not right, and that he was ready to forgive me. They were so delusional that they had literally assumed that I was there to apologize to them and not give them one last chance to fix the situation. I found it kind of funny. So Tyler had to explain that we were there to talk to them about what was going on, and he said that he was here to tell them that he was pressing charges against them. So, they had better get the car back, or else things would not turn out well for them. My dad got offended and told Tyler that he had no right to speak to him that way when he was standing on his property and asked us to get out of there. But I stood my ground, and I told him that we were not going anywhere until he had given us the contact details of the person he had supposedly sold the car to, because we just wanted the car back. We didn't want any trouble, neither for us nor for them. In fact, after this whole debacle was over, I planned on leaving them alone forever. When I said that, my mom came around and said that she didn't care that I was threatening her. She knew that she had another daughter to count on, and she was going to make sure that everyone cut me off after that. Tyler and I realized that there was no talking to them about this, so we would just have to go ahead with our threats and do what we had come here to do. So we left, because it was pretty pointless. He then contacted his lawyer and said that he was ready to press charges because he had tried to sort this before going the legal way. And now we were going to do what we had to do. So that was that, and then we returned to the hotel. Both of us were in a pretty nasty mood since my parents were wasting a lot of time, and it was affecting us badly as well. We were just discussing demanding some settlement money from them as well, along with the car in perfect condition, for all the time that they had wasted. And also, in case the car had any damages, we were going to get that money from them as well. While we were discussing it, I received a phone call from my older sister. I did not pick up because I couldn't possibly imagine what she would have to say to me, but then she called me a couple more times, so I finally answered. Then she started lecturing me about how I was harassing my parents and it was not right because they had raised me, so I needed to be grateful to them. I was pissed off, as I had already mentioned, and I really didn't want to speak to her. So I told her that maybe she believed I owed them something, but considering what they had done, I didn't think along the same lines. Things have always been different for her, so it's not like she would even understand where I was coming from. I tried to hang up, but then she said that it was just typical of me to be ungrateful for everything that has been done for me. I got very pissed off because, first of all, I don't even know what she was referring to, and secondly, I think what my parents had done was extremely unethical and stupid. So they definitely did not deserve to be excused by me like she believed they did. And then she made that comment. I asked her what she was referring to because I don't remember a single time I have been ungrateful to my parents. And she had the audacity to say that she was not talking about our parents, but she was talking about herself. That caught me off guard because I really couldn't recall any incident like that. And just as I had expected, she started ranting about something arbitrary that had taken place years ago. She told me that she had decided to go no contact with me. If you guys remember in my original post, I had mentioned that neither of us had decided to go no contact, it just happened organically. So I don't know where that came from. Apparently, because of my ungrateful behavior, she believed that back then, I got a really high-paying job because of her. My sister and I work in the same field, but even then, I was really shocked by that claim she made on the phone because I could not remember anything like that happening, and I was very lost. And then she started explaining. You know what, just hold on guys, her logic is going to blow your mind as well. Apparently, she believed that she was the one responsible for me getting that really great job back then because she had decided to move away with her husband and had withdrawn her application a couple of days after she had applied, after which I got selected. Eventually. In what universe does that make her responsible for getting me the job? I will never know. Anyway, she believed that she was owed a thank you after she decided to move away and left the job to me. And when? I did not thank her for anything. She decided that she was never going to speak to me again until I acknowledged what she had done for me, which never ended up happening, so we didn't speak for the past couple of years. I was so confused because I didn't even know what she was playing at, trying to make it seem like I was ungrateful when I didn't even know about any of these expectations that she had from me. And even if I had known, I wouldn't have thanked her because they were completely unreasonable. I told her off instantly, and I said that she was in no way responsible for me getting the job. I'm just as qualified as her, and I was just a bit younger at the time. But even then, I'm pretty sure I got the job because of my own hard work and perseverance, and not because she opted out. I told her that I didn't care if she thought that I was ungrateful, I just wanted her to leave me alone. And I said that I was going to make sure that my parents returned the car to me in perfect condition. And if she thought that it was unfair on my part, tough, because I was not going to change my mind. She was a fool to think that she could call me, say such stupid things to me, and then try to make me feel differently about this situation. I also told her that, obviously, she would never find any faults in our parents because she had always been treated like a princess, and I had been treated like I was just a normal kid. Even though I had never resented any of them for this, it was about time that I started acknowledging it. Then I hung up and blocked her, and now we are no contact permanently. I'm making sure of that. After the phone call, I discussed things with Tyler, and we're not sure if our parents put her up to this, but if they did, they just made things worse for themselves. Anyway, it has been an incredibly long day. And it's almost 1 in the morning now. We have another long day ahead of us tomorrow as well, so I'm just going to try and get some rest. It was very important for me to vent out my feelings here because even though I did speak to Tyler about it, I just wanted to talk about it some more and get it completely out of my system. And that's why this was such a long update, so thanks for sticking by until the end. It means a lot to me for the ones who read it all the way through. See you guys soon. I'll keep you guys updated on what happens next. And hopefully, my parents won't put up much of a fight anymore after this because I'm really sick of everything. And I just want to go home to my normal life now. Update 3. Hi. So it's around noon right now, and as it appears, Tyler and I might not have to go to court at all. This morning, my parents showed up at the hotel and started trying to get us to stop whatever it is that we were planning on doing. When we got a phone call from the front desk this morning, I was confused about whether I should let them up or not, but Tyler said that maybe we should talk to them because they might have changed their minds after last night. So we let them up, and when they were in our room, they started apologizing profusely, saying that they had thought things over after last night. And they really didn't want any trouble. So they would really appreciate it if we could settle this out of court. They told me that they had contacted the man who had purchased the car from them and were talking to him, trying to convince him to come back. Apparently, he was ready to go on a cross-country road trip. But I personally think he might have been planning to run away, because I can't think of anybody in their right mind who would have been willing to buy a car that they didn't even have the title to. And this was apparently coming at a really inconvenient time for him, but they were able to manage to convince him somehow, promising him that they would return $2,000 more than the amount that they had sold the car for. So we might be getting Tyler's car back after all, and we are really happy about it because we are relieved that we don't have to stay here for long since the guy who bought the car will be showing up at my parents' place in a couple of days to return the car. Getting involved with the car here would mean staying here for several days, and we didn't want that, so this is a better option, to be honest. My parents also tried to apologize to me for their behavior and said that they had realized how wrong they had been. But I told them that it was completely unnecessary, because no matter what they said at this point, I had made up my mind and I was going to cut them off as soon as I went back home. They seemed a bit unhappy about that and said that they really wanted to make it up to me, but I told them that my decision was final. And I really didn't want to speak to them because this had been a terrible experience for me, and they had completely humiliated me in front of my boyfriend the day before and had been insufferable since they sold the car, without my consent. So I really didn't want anything to do with them after this. They looked very upset while they were leaving, but at least this nightmare is going to be over now, and Tyler and I can finally go back home. Update 4. Hello. So a couple of weeks have passed, and we got the car back. It was in the same condition that we had kept it in, so thankfully my parents didn't have to pay any damages. But they found out about the car just in the nick of time, because if the guy had taken it on the cross-country road trip, things would have been much different. Anyway, my parents drove the car down to our place and tried to speak to us, to apologize to me once again and get me to talk to them. But I told them that now that the car had been delivered, we had nothing more to talk about. They were really desperate too. And I could tell that they really wanted to continue being a part of my life, because I don't think that they're getting any grandchildren from my sister anytime soon. But Tyler and I made it very clear that we did not want them loitering around our house, and made them leave by threatening to call the cops on them when they said that they were going to stand around until I forgave them, and said that I would keep in touch as I had previously. It was their own rotten behavior that had changed everything for us, and they needed to realize and acknowledge that. Until they did so, nothing would ever change. Anyway, that was 2 weeks ago, and recently Tyler proposed to me, and we are hosting an engagement party at our place this weekend. Invitations have already been sent out, and I have heard from a couple of relatives that my parents and my sister are very upset that they did not receive one since they thought that at least something as big as this would make me reconsider our situation, and I would extend a hand of peace towards them to make things right again. I would say it was a pretty unrealistic expectation to have from me because none of them had been kind to me, and Tyler and I were on the same page about whether we wanted them at our party or not. We didn't. It's a really important day for us, and if they can't be nice to me, they don't deserve to be around me. Besides, even if I thought about making things right with them and inviting them, then the day would become entirely about us and our family drama, and not about our engagement. So we decided to steer clear of that, and they kind of shot themselves in the foot by talking about this to our relatives because they definitely didn't have any nice things to say about me. They thought that I was being bratty and kind of silly by blowing things out of proportion. Well, so maybe I'll just stay this way and keep my distance from them, and then they won't have to deal with my brattiness anymore.